Chapter 71, Iron Hand King, 1, is that so? Having listened to Val's declaration, Kessel's expression turned unusually complicated. But why was it you? You were supposed to be a noble person, a pure warrior. You have your beliefs. Ha ha. Val started laughing for no reason. Why can't it be me? Kessel paused and looked sadly at Val's scar which extended from his chest to his chin. You were once my most trusted friend and brother. We grew up in the capital city together, and were the best partners and the closest of brothers. I was closer to you than to my blood brothers like my dear. We even promised to marry each other's sisters. Enough. Val abruptly raised his head. His eyes were filled with fury. You are not allowed to mention Lycia and Constance. You do not deserve to. Thales' heart jolted. The image of Lycia Arundi and Constance Jadestar flashed before his eyes, the lonely figure of the head ritual master and the little stone jar. The king's expression dimmed. I knew that you hated me, but I thought it was only because of Lycia, and that as a suzerain, you were still loyal to me in Constellation. I thought that the belief in your heart was still noble and unshakable. The Duke of the Northern Territory who betrayed the Northern Territory spoke resentfully, isn't that so? I hate you indeed, but everything I do is for the sake of Constellation. The king narrowed his eyes. What? Val Arundi stepped away from the formation of vassals. His gaze was firm. If I succeed just by paying some price and enduring momentary bloodshed, Constellation and the dragon, the shield and the blade of the Western Peninsula, will turn a new page in history. In the era of the ancient empire, Arundi was a supreme family that ruled the Northland province. On the other hand, Lampard was a blood descendant of the revolutionary king, Quisel Lampard, who revolted against the tyrant. The two families' enmity and antagonism have lasted since over 1,000 years ago, and this hatred has taken root in our blood, but if even archenemies like us can reconcile, what else is impossible? Thales sighed. No, you did not reconcile with each other. This is an exchange of benefits. Val took a step forward and looked around at everyone with a rabid expression. The disagreements and enmity between the two kingdoms will be cast aside thanks to the heroic friendship and loyal cooperation between Lampard and me. The blood descendants of both kingdoms, our children, will enter an engagement. Their son will inherit Constellation and Extet at the same time. The two mighty kingdoms, Constellation and the Dragon, will become one. Think about it. The warm, heroic blood of the great dragon of the north, infused into the body of the descendant of the mighty empire. Val continued excitedly, we might not be able to bring back the glory of the empire, but we can definitely put an end to the flames of war in the Northern Territory. The flames of war will never reignite, and disasters like the Bloody Year will never happen again. The Northern Territory will always be peaceful. To hell with your peacefulness. Count Zamunto spat angrily. Val did not care, he clenched his right fist tightly. It can even be taken one step further, a newborn power will rise in the Western Peninsula. With the shield in one hand and the blade in another, we will point our swords towards Camus Union, carve up the land of those tradesmen and profit from them. After the power equilibrium between the three strongest forces in the Western Peninsula is destroyed, the others will not pose a problem. Very soon, the Western Peninsula will be reunified. The Duke of the Northern Territory gritted his teeth and surveyed the nobles and officials. Therefore, this is all for the sake of Constellation so that it will not have to endure any more disasters, for its eventual greatness so that there will forever be peace between Constellation and the Dragon. Thales furrowed his brows. Behind them, Baron LaSalle coughed and awkwardly said, regarding this, I think, bang. Kessel V punched the armrest to his left. Shut up, extension. I will get even with you later. The Supreme King's voice was loud. He spoke in a tone that allowed no arguments, we are now discussing the internal affairs of Constellation. LaSalle was at a loss for words for a moment. The king slowly rose and looked down at Val from where he stood. For the sake of Constellation? Kessel V's eyes turned bloodshot, a sight rarely seen on him. His face was filled with fury. Betraying your own king and vassals, the Northern Territory, and its people, is this for the sake of Constellation? To not mind inciting a casualty-ridden war so that you can take the throne, is this for the sake of Constellation too? Val Arundi clenched his fists tightly and turned towards the king. Kessel Jadestar, do you think that you are nobler than me? Val trembled, as if he was trying hard to hold back his emotions. You, someone from the Jadestar family, are not qualified to point fingers at me. The next moment, without regards for manners, he roared, your family, the Jadestar royal family, is the greatest source of disaster in this kingdom. You are the ones who brought about hell, the disaster from 12 years ago. Until now, we are still atoning for the mistakes you have made. Thales could not help but clench his fists tightly. On the other hand, all the people in the hall turned simultaneously towards the king. Many of them had strange expressions on their faces. The king shut his eyes tightly. The Bloody Year? The Bloody Year? Yes. The Bloody Year. Val laughed miserably. He raised his hands and clenched his fists. The puzzlement in Thales' heart grew. He looked towards Gilbert. What hidden, yet extremely important secret, does the Bloody Year actually harbor? Val spoke resentfully, after that disaster ended, everybody only remembered that the Jadestar royal family was almost completely massacred. They only remembered that the T-Bark family only had an orphan girl left. Who would remember the contributions and sacrifices of the Northern Territory? The 15-year-old Duchess Lyanna inhaled deeply and shut her eyes. Who would remember all the blood, dead bodies, widows, and orphans left behind when Extet's army plowed through our land? Who would remember that after the bloody year ended, when the entire kingdom was joyfully celebrating the fortress treaty, almost 3/4 of the men and half the women in the northern territory were dead? The remaining elderly and children had to look for food outside in the cold winter, or else they would have starved to death at home. And those who went out to look for food, half of them froze to death in the wilderness. After I was crowned with the title of the Guardian Duke of the Northern Territory, the first thing I did wasn't to find them food, but to rebury those who starved or froze to death. Otherwise, their corpses would be dug out and eaten by the famished people who were so hungry they couldn't even walk. Have you seen such a scene, young master of the capital city? Who would remember that my father's head was hung on the gate of Cold Castle for a whole month because he refused to surrender after Cold Castle was breached? When I took him down, and I have to see that damned gate every day when I walk in and out of my own castle. The sword of reversing light, Prince Horus, entered Extet's tight encirclement heroically and unyieldingly. He fought to death instead of retreating, was wounded 11 times and bravely sacrificed his life. How glorious is that? However, who would remember that my brothers, the sons of Arundi, stayed close by his side and protected him till their deaths? Rohan, Cole, and Nolaner. The dead body of the Prince of Constellation was solemnly carried back to the capital city. But beside him, my brothers were chopped alive into minced meat by Extet's executioner. After everything ended, to bury them, I could only scoop up that thick pile of minced meat, mixed in soil and blood. Who would remember them? My sister and wife's carriage went missing in the wilderness that became chaotic from the raging war. There was no more news about them these past 12 years. I had countless nightmares about them, God knows what they went through. And you still dare to say that I only have a daughter as an heiress? Why do you think that I sent my 7-year-old daughter to the Tower of Eradication? To train her to become an heiress? Bullshit. I sent my daughter to the Tower of Eradication because I'm afraid that when I'm not around, the famished people, with eyes red with hunger, would climb into the ruins of Cold Castle and eat Miranda alive. Kessel shut his eyes tightly. Recalling that time, many people in the hall could not help but lower their heads. Val spoke, trembling. After going through the hell of the Desert War 5 years ago, Kessel Jadestar, how dare you complain about our weak military strength? How dare you complain that we don't even have enough cavalry units to form 5 vanguard teams? Do you think you are the person that I hate? Do you think that I hate you for not marrying my sister? Hate you for letting her down, causing her to become a priestess who will remain unmarried all her life? No. What I hate is the Jadestar family. Your damned family. All of you are at fault for those disasters. Your delusional, idiotic father, your uncle who thinks that he is funny by being rude, your pessimistic eldest brother, those arrogant, useless brothers of yours, and you, the supreme king, born with the blood of those tyrants from the empire. It is the Jadestar family, who always mingled with the calamities that brought upon the bloody year in Constellation, who brought upon such hell. Calamities? Mingled with the calamities? Terrified, Thales subconsciously looked at Gilbert who stood beside him. However, the latter only pursed his lips and did not say anything. Do you think that you are some sort of tragic king? The only person left in the Jadestar royal family? No. Val roared madly, the only things that you have ever cared about are yourself, your will, and your world. Why do you think you are where you are today? You all only have yourselves to blame for the things that happened to you during the bloody year. You are just like your damned father. Both of you knew where your choices would lead, but you both never gave a damn. You never tried to understand your own vassals, show concern for your own subjects nor care about the people beside you, Iron Hand King. When they call you this, do you not feel mocked? You don't rule with an iron hand, you are just cold-blooded. Val's emotions had reached a boiling point and he roared in sadness and despair. Why didn't Charlton and the Shadow Shield kill all of you in one go? If it were not for you all bringing back that monster. The king abruptly opened his eyes and cut him off with a shout. Enough. Kessel was agitated. He furiously rebuked Arundi, Val. You are still as foolish, stupid, extreme, and as stubborn as you used to be. Kessel glared fixedly at Val. His gaze was inexplicably complicated. You only believe in what you want to believe in. You are like a foolish piece of wood, ridiculously ignorant. Breathing heavily, Val stared blankly at the king. The king sat down dejectedly and tiredly said, Guards, send Duke Arundi to the dungeons. Chapter 72, Iron Hand King, 2. 2 members of the royal guards clad in eternally new armor wordlessly went to stand beside Val. Duke Cullen shook his head in resignation. No mercy between friends, a falling out between brothers. Is there anything sadder than this? No one answered him. After a moment, Val Arundi smiled calmly and raised his head. At least I did one thing. He looked towards Baron LaSalle, who had a strange expression on his face. I brought about war, didn't I? Lampard and I planned everything, but aren't these dissatisfied nobles of Constellation the ones who took action and killed the prince? In an instant, the expressions of Zayen, Koster and some other counts became strange. Duke Cullen was the only one who was still shaking his head and sighing, as though he was still immersed in the falling out between brothers, which had just happened moments ago. Val spoke mournfully, Kel, Constellation hasn't recovered from the blow yet, and is no match to Extet at all. What are you going to do? The king said coldly, stay here and watch then. Compare my actions with your own cowardice and watch how I, the cold-blooded Iron Hand King, will face the wrath of the great dragon. Val laughed loudly in grief. What? Are you going to enlist children below 12 into the army again? The king no longer paid him any mind. Instead, he turned towards Extet's emergency envoy. Baron LaSalle, I have already fulfilled at least the third condition from among all the conditions you have just stated. Unfortunately, I am unable to hand you the Guardian Duke of the Northern Territory, nor the Archduke of Black Sand. Since there were people from your kingdom involved, it seems unreasonable to still ask us for compensation using our territories or resources. LaSalle replied with a solemn expression, impossible. Just now, I only saw the members of the Royal Court of Constellation argue among themselves. There is no proof that states that the Archduke of Black Sand was involved. Extet insists on the conditions for compensation stated earlier. The exact amount can be negotiated, but it cannot be remitted. He raised his head. Otherwise, let us meet on the battlefield and let our swords and knives do the talking. The nobles in the hall began whispering among themselves. Val, who was guarded by the royal guards from both sides, even started to laugh scornfully. Besides, King Neuvin's fury and despair of losing his only heir is not something that can be made even by just finding the culprit. LaSalle added with a gloomy expression. The king sighed. True, Kessel V spoke drearily, I felt it. LaSalle raised his brows. I could feel his fury and despair. The king said gloomily, this is indeed unjust for King Neuvin. The assassination of the diplomat group and the misfortune of the prince, no matter who did this, they not only insulted Extet, but also Constellation. The shame felt by Constellation from this incident is 100 even 1,000 times more than the former. Many pairs of eyes looked towards Val at the same time. The king raised his head, and his gaze was icy cold. Constellation has never thought of evading responsibility. Since it is unjust, we will definitely pay what is due. The two counts of the Northern Territory immediately became nervous. Is the king really going to sacrifice the Northern Territory? I mean, you know, Duke Arundi. Zamunto stole a glance at Val. The latter smiled indifferently. Baron LaSalle smiled. Your Majesty, you are indeed an honorable and brave person. Whether it is Pine Nut County, Bear County, or even the peripheral area of Cold Castle, as long as our side is satisfied, the exact land, and even the surface area, are actually negotiable. Your people will definitely be satisfied, the king said coldly. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the Supreme King of Constellation grabbed the scepter beside his hand, rose from his throne once more, and slowly walked down the steps. Kessel V took heavy steps towards the bewildered LaSalle. Go and reply to King Neuvin and your master at Black Sand region. Constellation is deeply apologetic and feels great guilt about the assassination of the diplomat group. LaSalle flashed a smile and nodded slightly. I will relay your words. As for the compensation, we will need a map to measure the territories, no. LaSalle was stunned. The Supreme King continued. Constellation does not have any territories that can be used as compensation to Extet. We are unable to make up for King Neuvin's grief and loss either. LaSalle's expression changed. Thales' breathing quickened. Is he going to go? This is Sparta. However, Constellation will not evade its responsibilities, the king said softly. In the next moment, the prince had goosebumps all over his body. The 39th Supreme King of Constellation, Kessel Jadestar, slowly raised his scepter, which shone with an unearthly starlight, and pointed it at Thales. You have not met him yet, correct? Kessel V said slowly, this is Thales Jadestar, the second prince of Constellation, my son, and my only heir. Everyone looked at Thales. I will send him to Dragon Cloud City to apologize to King Neuvin and Extet. Thales was stunned. LaSalle was also stunned. The king did not look at Thales anymore, but continued speaking coldly, if this is not enough, if the pain of losing a son cannot be eased with an apology. King Neuvin wants justice, correct? I will give him justice. Tell King Neuvin that he can kill my son, kill the only heir of Constellation to avenge his only son and heir who died in Constellation. Let him fill the void with blood and wash off the hatred with murder. Take my son's life in exchange for his son's life. Take the blood of Constellation to make up for the blood of Extet. What? Thales stood where he was, stunned. He understood what the king said, but he also did not understand it. What? At that moment, everybody in the hall, be they nobles, suzerains, officials, guards, servants, or even the Duke of the Northern Territory, opened their mouths wide in shock. Your ma, Gilbert's face was pale. He wanted to object immediately, but somebody was faster than him. Your Majesty. For the first time in history, Duke Cullen's expression was solemn. He spoke loudly with an anxious expression, do you know what you are saying? Thales was trembling, and his ears rang, he could not even feel his own breathing. Kessel replied coldly, quiet, Bob. Your king has already made his decision. Cullen stared at the Supreme King in shock, unable to say anything. Even Fakenhas could not laugh anymore. Behind him, Zayan watched Thales with a complicated expression. On the other hand, the one-eyed dragon lowered his head in contemplation. At that moment, the 9-pointed star royal crown on Kessel's head glistened. Like an emotionless god, he spoke slowly to LaSalle, who was already in total shock. On a personal level, we should be able to quench a father's fury and ease his despair if we exchange a father's only son with another father's only son. On an official level, exchanging the life of the heir to the King of Constellation for the heir to the Archduke of Dragoncloud City is fair, is it not? The king stepped onto the floor beneath the stairs. His stately and authoritative voice boomed like thunder. After being tainted by the blood of each other's only heirs, Constellation will not owe anything to Extet anymore. This is fair enough, is it not? At that time, we will not be able to turn back anymore. We will forego all qualms and burdens, then engage in an all-out war with the determination to completely annihilate the other party. This is fair, no? Different emotions shone in LaSalle's eyes. He was so stunned by the king's sudden, shocking words that his eyes opened wide and his mouth hung open. He raised the scroll in his right hand, and his mouth trembled. He wanted to say something, but was at a loss for words. It is one matter to draw on a horrible, foreign affairs incident and strive for the gains of Exdet, and perhaps Archduke Lampard too, to such an extreme extent. However, to sacrifice their only heir, Constellation does not run a king selection system like Exdet does. If the prince who will inherit the throne is killed, it will be a blood feud that spans for generations for tens of generations. This will forever turn the two kingdoms into irreconcilable arch-enemies, and they would not stop fighting until the other is destroyed. It will bring war that destroys kingdoms. This is another matter entirely. Under King Kessel's authoritative and aggressive gaze, LaSalle was drenched in cold sweat. His brows moved about, as if they reflected the intense conflict in his mind. With my status, I am unable to reply to this matter right now, he replied with a stutter. Kessel yelled furiously, then go and ask your king. LaSalle was so scared that he took a step backwards. The Supreme King did not even glance at Thales. He continued speaking in a dark tone, tell him that I have already dispatched Baron Araka Murch, along with 2,000 regular soldiers of the royal family, to Broken Dragon Fortress. Prince Thales will set out soon afterwards and go before King Nuvan. The prince will be at his mercy. This is the price Constellation can pay. The people in the entire hall did not even dare to breath. The king glanced at LaSalle, who was no longer frowning and who was at a loss for what to do. As for Archduke Lampard from Black Sand region, I know that he has already dispatched a large army and is preparing to invade the northern territory at any time. Will he make way and escort my son to Dragon Cloud City to apologize, or will he wage war on Baron Murch at all costs? I look forward to seeing what he would choose. LaSalle staggered backwards in dejection. He gasped for breath like a drowning man. Your Majesty. The one who spoke up was the 15-year-old Duchess Lyanna. The elegant young woman's face was pale. His Highness is your only heir. If something bad happens to him on the way, you're thrown. Ha! The Supreme King let out a bark of laughter out of anger. That is far too simple a problem. Thales' whole body trembled as he looked at everything happening in front of him. Kessel V turned and faced the suzerains in the hall. No matter what happens to the second prince, if he so happens to die in the royal bloodline's existence is completely wiped out. The person who totally destroys Constellation's enemy, who successfully avenges the last Jadestar prince, who takes revenge for the absolutely humiliated Constellation. The king abruptly turned and raised his scepter up high. Will be the next Supreme King of Constellation. If Constellation does not even have a person like this. Kessel coldly swept his gaze over the nobles in the hall. He spat out his words, and they were as sharp as knives. Is there any meaning left to its existence? The whole hall was silent. Kessel coldly concluded, the meeting is over. I await King Nuvan's reply. Then, Duke Valorundi, whose face was ghastly pale, struggled to speak. He stared at Kessel and at Thales in disbelief. What sort of crazy thing are you about to do again? Kessel V sneered. Crazy? The king snorted coldly and repeated Val's words from before in a mocking tone, everything I do is for the sake of Constellation. Two guards walked forward and took the stunned Duke away. The sweat-drenched LaSalle left. The suzerains whispered among themselves and looked at the king and his heir. Gilbert clenched his fists tightly and stared at the king, who donned an astral blue cape. The king left in large strides and did not spare a glance at anyone. Thales was absent-minded and still, not moving except breathing. He was unaware of the stares from the entire hall trained on him. Chapter 73, Powerless. Lower City District, Underground Market, Sunset Pub. You should have gone to take a look 2 days ago. There were hordes of people, especially when the second prince appeared. That cheer, I could not help but cheer along. Hey, brat. Watch where you're going. A 10-year-old boy who carried a sack full of potatoes squeezed past the plump and fierce Edmund with an agonized look. Edmund snorted, turned his head back and continued fiddling with the food on the plate. You didn't know about this, right? The new prince is called Thales. The exact same name as that black-haired little scoundrel who always came to ask for free stuff. Brat, why are you looking here? What does the prince have to do with you? Continue with your work. I heard that Kessel, that playboy, wants to ask for peace from Exdet with the prince's life as an exchange. People were talking about this everywhere in the market today. Everyone was righteously indignant, saying that all the suzerains in Constellation are worthless wretches that are unable to protect the kingdom, and that the royal family had sacrificed too much for Constellation. Bullshit. Are we talking about that Jadestar royal family that only produces lunatics? You don't know this, but 12 years ago, I was in front of the palace door. In front of Edmund, a young woman wearing tight long pants and a vest played with her short, brown hair in boredom. She leaned over the food delivery window between the counter and the scullery, looking as if she had given up on life. This brunette was lithe and had a valiant bearing. At that moment, she spoke through gritted teeth as her face twitched. I'm asking you, are you going to give me that plate of steak before you poke them until they're shredded to pieces? Edmund raised his head. His expression was filled with fury. He glared indignantly at the bartender of Sunset Pub, Jayla Charlton, and angrily pushed the steak in his hand into her hands. Jayla turned and passed the plate to a timid little girl with a scar on her face beyond the counter. Behind her, Edmund snorted. What is this attitude? Your uncle only wanted to have a little chat with you, and to give you some guidance so that you can forget that blonde cop who was very obviously a heartbreaker. Jayla angrily rolled her eyes. Her delicate face became as sour as rotten milk. She turned her head and snapped, damned fatty. If you use this to stir up an argument again, I will talk about your dream lover. Hey, hey, hey. The plump cook Edmund's expression immediately changed greatly. He raised his plump hands and tapped the food delivery window a few times. Are you going to turn hostile because of a slight disagreement? I was just showing concern for my adorable niece's love life. It is the most important thing for two people to have a common language. If a bartender from a gang mingles with a police officer. Jayla could not take it anymore and angrily punched the bar counter. Everybody, listen up. Jayla said gruffly and loudly, drawing the stares of all the customers, my still single, 41-year-old uncle, the cook of Sunset Pub, Edmund Scorch, has a woman he loves the most in his life. She is. At that moment, like a frightened pet cat, Edmund sucked in a sharp breath. Before Jayla could reveal the name, the plump cook roared furiously with the most energy he had ever used in his life, stop. Jayla shut her mouth and glared disdainfully at him. She scornfully continued, you are going to be forever alone, scaredy cat. Person with an unrequited love. Edmund stared dejectedly at his niece and spoke in an embarrassed manner, we are out of potatoes. I'll go and restock. Cindy, who was coming in with another bag of potatoes, watched with a bewildered expression as Edmund escaped from the scullery. We are out of potatoes? Then what am I carrying? At the moment, a boy whose right hand was wrapped in strips of cloth staggered in with a frightened expression. They're here. Ryan's face was glum. With haste, he dashed behind the bar counter. There was a bruise on his head. The stunned Cindy hugged the poor child. Jayla's face sank. She put down the rag in her hand. Coria, who had just finished delivering food, raised her head and looked at the main door. She could not help but start to tremble. She watched with a pale face as more than 10 malicious and powerful-looking figures in black rudely pushed aside the customers who blocked their way, then slowly walked into the pub. The noisy pub immediately fell silent. Go to the scullery. Jayla moved her hand to her thigh and calmly alerted the 3 child beggars, but 2 of the thugs walked forward with hostile expressions and forcefully blocked the door between the bar counter and the scullery. The 3 child beggars cowered and hid beside Jayla again. Jayla asked furiously, what is the meaning of this? This is Sunset Pub, not Blackstreet. Even Morris does not dare to behave atrociously here. However, the group of thugs were not swayed at all. Instead, with calm expressions, they walked to every corner of the pub as if they were on sentry duty. A brawny-looking thug, obviously a tough one to deal with, took out a single-bit axe from behind him. Under the indignant and terrified gazes of a few customers, he swung the axe with one hand and with a cold expression, then chopped down a bar table. Thud! The huge force smashed the table in 2, and the pieces flew outwards. Amid the panic, many of the customers hugged their heads to shield themselves from the flying pieces. The brawny man with the axe coldly turned his head and shouted loudly to the other people in the pub, the Brotherhood is handling some affairs here. Fuck off. The customers in the pub recognized the identity of these people, and who they worked for, Aoshchok the Thunder Axe, one of the Brotherhood's 13 generals. They were the group of people who were responsible for the trans-border smuggling of weapons, and were an incredibly difficult bunch to handle. Footsteps rang in the air. Many of the people did not even hesitate before getting up and escaping from the pub. Suddenly, a streak of silver lightning flew towards Aoshchok at a rapid speed. It was a throwing knife with its blade curved at a strange angle, the famous wolf limb blade from Sunset Pub. Aoshchok's expression changed. He flung his axe outwards and knocked away the throwing knife just in time. Ting! Aoshchok's whole body trembled. He realized in shock that the throwing knife carried a strange surge of energy, and as the blade shook, the energy was transmitted to his hand. Because of that, he could not help but freeze. Gritting his teeth, Aoshchok fought against the shock. What on earth is this? The graceful figure moving faster than him had already grabbed onto another knife. The knife flew rapidly towards him from the bar counter. Assassination blade. It's coming straight to my throat. Aoshchok was still frozen. His pupils shrank. He was already unable to avoid it. However, the anticipated splattering of blood did not come. Jayla gritted her teeth and stared ahead in disbelief. Her knife, which should have plunged into Aoshchok's throat, was gripped tightly by a hand that was wearing an iron glove. The owner of the iron glove was a middle-aged man whose face was full of scars. He stood beside Jayla. As simple as that, during such a crucial moment, he seized the Charlton family's assassination blade. The scar-faced middle-aged man said coldly, I still remember that as a Charlton who abandoned her family occupation, you were only a useless person of the ordinary class. If it weren't for a reversed machete, you wouldn't even have the chance to become a bartender here. The Brotherhood does not take in useless people. The middle-aged man let go of the blade in his hand and snorted softly, however, from the strange shock your knife delivered, you have unexpectedly become a super-class elite. Looks like the massacre and battle in Red Street Market made you improve. As expected, people from the Charlton family can only improve their skills in bloody situations. Face filled with fury, Jayla took a step back. She gritted her teeth and stared at the formidable enemy before her. Damn it. After the incident at Red Street Market, she had undoubtedly improved a lot. She reached superclass and also mastered eerie shock, But why was this man able to seize her assassination blade? The few remaining customers whispered among themselves and left dejectedly. One of them looked bewildered. He wanted to speak out, but was immediately pulled away by a person beside him who knew everything about what was going on. They recognized the middle-aged man whose face was full of scars. He was the head in the weapon smuggling scene, and was only second to Sinzao the Crownless Fist among the Brotherhood's 6 powerhouses. The Iron Heart, Shanda Rhoda. He is also quite Rhoda's father. Jayla gritted her teeth in silence. Without hesitation, all the customers ran off. Not a single one remained. You don't have to wonder why I'm able to catch your knife. There are never any certainties when it comes to battles. The alleged classification of ordinary class, supraclass and so on, is just a way of categorizing things. Rhoda, who looked vile and sinister due to the scars, sneered softly. He did not even look at Jayla. Ayashchak glared indignantly at Jayla and returned the axe to his back. He pulled out a chair for Rhoda. Due to various reasons, there are instances where one party totally dominates the battle between 2 people of the same class. There are also instances where 2 people of different classes are equally matched in a battle. All of this is very normal. Rhoda casually sat on the chair and folded his arms. He looked towards the female bartender, who seemed like she was facing a formidable enemy. When I was young, I even saw a swordsman of only superclass engage in a battle where there was a huge gap in skill between him and his opponent, and he had almost no possibility of victory. That superclass swordsman slaughtered 2 supreme class elites. What? Jayla's pupils contracted. Looking at the astonished Jayla, Rhoda laughed. That was the battle that made the person I respect the most famous. Facing such a tight encirclement and such enemies, I thought I would to die there, until he raised his sword. Ever since then, I did not believe in any absolute classification of abilities. Even supreme class elites can be slaughtered like pigs. Rhoda leaned his body forward. Then a contemplative and serious expression appeared on his scarred face. So why would it be impossible for my good-for-nothing son to be killed by a few child beggars? Jayla furrowed her brows as shock appeared on her face. She stared at Rhoda. As expected, he is here too. The 3 children behind her cowered even more. Without realizing it, Jayla took a step sideways and shielded the 3 children. She raised the knife in her hand. Now then, are you sure that you still want to use the knife on me, little girl? Rhoda exhaled and laughed in satisfaction. Through the corner of her eyes, the female bartender swept her gaze past Ayashchak and the burly men around her, who were more than 10 in number. She knew that this was the elite squad that was responsible for the smuggling of weapons in the Brotherhood. She was no match for them. Jayla gritted her teeth and thrust the wolf-limb blade in her right hand into the table beside her. Damn it! What should I do? So this is the prototype of the reversed machete's weapon? The scar-faced middle-aged man looked at the strange curvature of the wolf-limb blade. He gently stroked the 4 rings on his left hand with his iron glove-clad right hand and slowly said, the legendary assassin of the Brotherhood changed his weapon because of the creativity of a little girl like you. He even had a change of nicknames in a short few years. This is very rare indeed. I call it the wolf-limb blade, Jayla said coldly, looking as if she wanted them to leave. Rhoda laughed softly. Why does it matter? There's no use in having a flashy weapon name. The key lies in the person using it. In your hands, this knife can only be used to cut flesh. On the other hand, in the hands of the reversed machete, it can be used to break through layers upon layers of defenses and slaughter the former Duke of Tricolor Iris Flowers of Constellation. Jayla furrowed her brows tightly and glared at the scar-faced middle-aged man in front of her. Get straight to the point, Jayla said coldly. The old man doesn't like people disrupting business. Shanda Rhoda, the terrifying existence within the 6 powerhouses of the Brotherhood, laughed loudly. Do you think that you can scare me with the reversed machete? Jayla did not answer, but a cold chill ran down her spine. The other party came prepared. You know, I usually don't really bother about my own son. A bitch gave birth to him. I don't even know if he's mine. Besides, he's a good-for-nothing. Rhoda snorted softly. So, I don't really care if he's alive, either. Rhoda raised his head and exercised the joints in his neck. But since he took on my family name, and even works in the Brotherhood, I cannot tolerate the fact that someone is challenging my authority with my son's life. Rhoda's words were ruthless. I also cannot tolerate the fact that a person who owes a debt of blood to the Rhoda family has not received due punishment. Jayla furrowed her brows. She looked around once more. What should I do? When will Edmund come back? Where is the old man? I only learned, after killing more than 10 child beggars, that the 4 child beggars who could not be found all this while, and whom are the greatest suspects in the murder of my son, might be hiding in Sunset Pub. Rhoda's gaze shot towards the 3 children. Korea was so scared that she immediately burst into tears. Jayla gritted her teeth. Recalling Thales' words, she took a step forward and shouted loudly, the 3 of them have nothing to do with your son's death. There is a missing boy. He is the culprit who killed Quide. Rhoda laughed loudly. The scars on his face twitched. I know this brat with a severed hand said that too. Thales, right? He has the same name as the new prince. Now, the problem is, where is he? Jayla exhaled deeply and forced herself to forget that night in Red Street Market. You shouldn't ask me that. Rhoda narrowed his eyes. Then, why are you providing such great protection to these 3 child beggars who escaped? Does Sunset Pub really need 3 child beggars who don't even have the energy to carry plates to operate? This is my business, Jayla said as she pursed her lips. Surprisingly, Rhoda raised his brows and nodded. True. Amid Jayla's puzzlement, Shanda Rhoda nonchalantly leaned backwards and waved at his followers. So, I suppose that you wouldn't mind handing over these brats who escaped to me? Before Jayla could react, Rhoda's followers went forward without hesitation. Amid the three children's wails and kicks, the thugs coldly separated them from her and violently hoisted them onto their shoulders. Big sister Jayla, Korea cried. One of the thugs covered her mouth with his hand. Sinti's arms were locked behind his back. He grunted from the intense pain. Ryan just shivered as the thugs subdued him. Jayla's eyes widened in fury. You? The raging female bartender abruptly pulled out the knife from the table. As she moved, she firmly executed the swift killing blade, which had made the bald Sven surrender and ask for mercy when they were in Red Street Market. She aimed for Rhoda. But her knife was unable to move more than 1 feet. Without moving, Rhoda's powerful arm shot out arm, and the iron glove-clad hand firmly seized her knife again. Like a mamba snake who had its vital point seized, Jayla's agile figure immediately froze. Jayla stared in shock at the calm-looking Rhoda. She only felt as though there was a huge stone weighing 10,000 kilograms hanging from the knife in her hand. She had to grip onto it with all her might to keep it from slipping away from her hand. At that moment, the female bartender's expression turned extremely unpleasant. Impossible, the swift killing blade, which excels in speed, subtlety, and nimbleness, is also. Rhoda said flatly, don't force my hand, little girl. We are both in supraclass, but when it comes to combat, I have 100 methods that I can use to defeat you effortlessly. Jayla watched in disbelief as the wolf-limb blade in her hand was bent by Rhoda, just like that. He loosened his grip and let go of the deformed wolf-limb blade. However, the blade of an axe was then placed right in front of Jayla's throat. Aoschok's gaze was filled with fighting spirit. This time, you don't stand a chance. Jayla bit her lip. Looking at the enemies around her, who showed the faint intention to surround and attack her, she furiously said, this is Sunset Pub. You all are challenging the old man's authority. Rhoda stood up coldly. There was fury and hatred in his eyes. Listen up, little girl. I respect your family name and the owner of this pub, that is why I did not harm you at all. I have already displayed the highest level of friendship and kindness possible to you, along with respect towards the reversed machete. Jayla indignantly raised her head. But you can't. Rhoda roared and cut her off, enough with the nonsense. Jayla was stunned for a moment. The savage-looking Rhoda went before her and stared her down from above. Do you think I do not know that you have something to do with my son's death? A good few hundred people saw him come to your pub and had a hand named by you. He knew? Under the intense tension, Jayla's breathing quickened. I don't give a damn about how he fell into another person's trap. I am not concerned as to who killed him either, whether his name is Thales or Tyler. Rhoda exhaled, grinned hideously, and continued, I only plan to get rid of all the people related to his death, let the others see Rhoda's tactics. This should be enough. The three children were still struggling and kicking. However, their strength was gradually draining from their bodies. Rhoda's scar-filled face twitched. He grimly said, so you can see that I am already very lenient with you, little girl. You should go and take a look at Mayor Rick. Lance spoke about all the good things he could for him. Jayla's heart jolted. Rick? Rhoda straightened his clothes and flashed a hideous grin. So, on behalf of my old friend, I only dug out one of his eyes and destroyed one of his hands. Rhoda's voice then became indifferent once again. Don't worry. I'm not a murderous maniac, nor am I a sadist. It's just that I have to retain some of my authority. Jayla lowered her head. Her heart was filled with anguish. What should I do? I can't think of anything I can do at all. Clever brat, if you were here, what would you do? Continue with your business, then. I will compensate for the losses here. Rhoda indifferently turned and strode across the messy floor of the pub. He walked out the main door. Send my regards to the reversed machete. Looking at the tables and chairs that were scattered all over the floor, Aoschok nonchalantly threw down a bag of coins. The Thunder Axe said with a cold expression, you are truly amazing, but I will definitely become stronger than you. The group laughed. Jayla stared at their retreating figures in a trance. The only thing left in the air were the wails of the three children as they struggled. Jayla clenched her fists tightly and stared at the wolf-limb blade in her hand. Her expression showed that she was struggling. Her hand, which held the knife, began trembling. The children's voices slowly became further away, softer, and finally faded away. Jayla lowered her head. Clang clang. The wolf-limb blade dropped onto the floor powerlessly. The knees of Sunset Pub's female bartender buckled under her. Just like that, she dropped to her knees amid the mess on the floor. The bartender trembled and spoke helplessly to herself, Jayla Charlton, you are so pathetic. Jayla shut her eyes tight. She gritted her teeth so tightly that her teeth almost shattered from the force. A few tears slid down her cheeks. Sorry, brat. The tears dripped down onto the floor. I couldn't protect them well. Chapter 74, Homicidal Maniac Mindy's Hall. Snow was falling from the sky onto the training field, where a small figure could be seen holding onto a heavy, thick wooden sword and shield. With his alternating footsteps and defensive moves, he parried the royal guard's wooden sword. Thales huffed and puffed as he straightened his back once more, leaning his weight against the wooden sword. He then yelled, again. His practice partner, Cora, the head of Mindy's Hall's Jadestar private army, stared at him with a troubled look. How long has His Highness been behaving like this? At the side of the training field was Count Gilbert Queso, and he looked worried as he asked a Jadestar private soldier standing beside him. The guard replied worriedly too, the training has been going on continuously for 3 hours since this morning until now, sir. As for last night, the light in His Highness' study room was on for the entire night. Sir Cora even made us stay up all night to guard the entrance to his room, so that we could rush in immediately should anything happen inside. Gilbert sighed. After that unusual meeting with the diplomats the day before, the second prince had returned to the Mindy's Hall immediately. Gilbert, on the other hand, received the most urgent command from His Majesty to thoroughly prepare for the prince's diplomatic mission to the north. A healthy and strong messenger crow would not take up more than a few days to travel between Eternal Star City and Dragoncloud City. They could depart at any time. For the entirety of the previous day, he busied himself along with many officials as well as nobles and suzerains of different classes on various matters, from His Highness' attendance and the schedule for his trip, to the wording on his letter of credentials. It was only until now that he finally had time to take a look at Mindy's Hall. However, what Gilbert was really worried about was Thales' mental condition. After all, not every child could face such a situation peacefully where his father decided to use him as a bargaining chip and send him to appease a war. Currently, His Highness was probably upset over His Majesty's seemingly heartless decision. Gilbert lifted his head up and to his surprise, he saw that Thales was panting and gesturing with his hand before tossing away the sword in his grasp. I am going to rest for a while and have lunch. I have been training for such a long time, why did you not remind me of it? Thales waved his hands and asked tiredly. Cora, who looked as if a great weight was lifted off his shoulders, immediately nodded in agreement whereas Thales started to unbuckle the shield on his arm. Gilbert swiftly walked towards him, then the former Foreign Affairs Minister spoke cautiously to Thales. Your Highness, pardon me for being straightforward. Your old wounds are not fully recovered yet, so you should not exhaust your body in this manner. Gilbert, you do not have to worry about this. Look, my wounds are almost healed. Thales skillfully and swiftly took off the shield as he exercised his left arm. He bared his teeth and said, in a mere 3 days, maybe, I really am some sort of monster. Gilbert was left speechless before he replied with a solemn expression, Your Highness, please do not think of such nonsense. All right, it is my own body after all. And I have already been living in this world for a few years. Thales cut him off and laughed in a contemptuous manner. Do you really think that I am not aware of the real reason? This peculiar physique I have is mostly due to my mother, who is even more mysterious than a mystic, am I right? Thales laughed as he carefully observed Gilbert's expression. He was hoping to see and understand something from Gilbert's reaction. Yes. Not long after he arrived in Mindy's Hall, Thales had been skeptical ever since he saw the king's odd attitude whenever he spoke of his mother. From his queer and mysterious mystic energy, to his strange cognitive abilities, from the flashbacks that appear without reason, to his ability to recover, which seemed inhuman. There was something else that was the most questionable. Ever since he was found and retrieved by the Jadestar royal family, he could not seem to hide his abnormality as a transmigrator even if he tried to. Even Thales was fully aware that his style of conversation, knowledge and experiences, reactions, and even his learning ability to become well-versed with the letters here within a short month were very uncommon. However, other than the initial surprise, both Gilbert and his father in name had very few reactions to it, as if this was the way he was supposed to be. It was as if Thales was born to be exactly like this. The first and the last points, along with Lycia's and the king's attitudes especially made him almost 100% certain that the traits he exhibited were indeed related to his mother, who he had yet to meet. During Girana, whom the king and God's spokesperson feared to the point where they were not even willing to mention her, who exactly was she? Of course, Thales already formed a conclusion on this a long time ago. He thought about what Yodel said in Mindy's Hall, and what Arundi said in Renaissance Palace. The family that was tangled with disaster. Thales stared at his 9-pointed star symbol and sighed. His mother was very likely a. He had always tried his best to not think in this direction before he got a confirmation. However, he had to investigate and find the answer. Based on the king and Lycia's odd behavior as well as his middle name, he was unwilling to let go of any possible information. Even if the outcome would not be good. Gilbert furrowed his brows deeply. Indeed. His Highness had started becoming suspicious a long time ago. Your Highness. Gilbert exhaled while he shook his head and said, I am not in the position to comment on your origins, but you must know, within your body flows the Jadestar blood, which you have inherited from His Majesty. Your bloodline also originated from the ancient empire, which continued on to the final empire. It is the most honorable lineage in the history of mankind, the imperial family's bloodline, Carlu's family. Maybe there are some unknown secrets that are hidden within this kind of ancient and noble bloodline. Thales sighed to himself. As expected of a foreign affairs officer. From his expression to his choices of words, he managed to not give anything away. I can only use another way to look for my own mother. All right, no need to worry too much about me. Thales sat down, still sweating and panting. He shook his own boot to get rid of the sand inside. Anyway, it is not a bad thing for now. There was no way there would be such a thing as distinctions of superiority and inferiority in terms of bloodlines and races. So, the prince replied joyfully, as for my mother, anyway, inevitably I will know about her one day. But currently, my top priority is the nation with the dragon flag to the north. Gilbert was stunned. He glanced at Cora, who was tidying up the training equipment, then looked towards Thales with a troubled gaze. Your Highness, I think what His Majesty said when he sent you on a diplomatic mission yesterday was definitely not what he meant literally. I know. The king has his own things to consider. Thales shook off the last of the sand from his boot and stood up. Gilbert looked at him worriedly. Exactly, therefore, you totally do not have to, be so dispirited. What? Thales furrowed his brows. Then he immediately understood what Gilbert meant. Why? The prince turned around and laughed as he said, did you assume my sword practice just now was a sign of despair or a way to vent out my anger? Gilbert raised his eyebrows. Oh my god. Thales slapped his forehead and laughed bitterly as he said, well, since I am about to visit an unfamiliar nation, I still have to prepare myself no matter what. Although a 7-year-old body can do nothing much, at least, I have to practice and familiarize myself with the Northland military sword style and learn how to ride a horse. So, when I am in a dangerous situation, I will at least know how to protect my own life, correct? If I have good luck and I am able to develop the power of eradication. Gilbert could not help but to cut Thales off. Your Highness, traditionally, in the Tower of Eradication, the record for the youngest age of those whose power of eradication was awakened early due to unique training and extraordinary luck was at least 12 years old. The usual time of awakening is 16 years old, as for 7 years old, Thales felt awkward and laughed dryly after he heard what Gilbert told him. He scratched his head in embarrassment as he replied in a low voice, is that so? I thought it was the same thing as brushing up the degree of proficiency. Gilbert was still staring dubiously at him. But do you really have no ill feelings and understand His Majesty's intention? What are you even saying? Anyway, I am also a postgraduate with a great ability to resist stress. I am the second prince with great mental fortitude. Thales patted the dirt off himself indifferently and walked towards the study room, preparing to have lunch then practice writing. Alright, when I heard him say that he wanted to kill me in order to make up to Extet, I was indeed frightened. But I spent an entire night rummaging through documents. Mindy's Hall has too little resources, and the order is not logical too. Nonetheless, at least I understand some of His Majesty's intentions now. Gilbert noticed that Thales either used King or His Majesty to address Kessel V whenever Thales talked about him. He silently sighed to himself. As expected, His Highness still harbors a grudge towards His Majesty in terms of how he acknowledged His Highness the last time. Do you want to listen to my own opinions regarding my diplomatic mission to Extet? Thales asked as he kneaded his sore nape and remaced. Gilbert slightly bowed respectfully. I am all ears. In the dark. Morat's unique but hoarse and old voice echoed deeply. He managed to run away? The person who replied him was Raphael, who had a brisk and bright voice. Our people also feel strange about this. It was almost like the strange doctor had already seen through the trap and returned without any hesitation. The assassination team missed him. These past few days, we had been constantly moving back and forth between Extet and Constellation's eastern border, which is between Fries family's lonely old tower and Trentida family's Reformation Tower. However, they can no longer find any traces of Ramon. Morat placed his chin on his palms as he quietly muttered, even if the legacy has already been extinct for more than 600 years, a wizard will always be a wizard. No matter how greatly we view his power, it will never be enough. But it was obvious that he came prepared. The Black Prophet slightly lifted his head up. It is impossible for our trap to miss him. He must have had a helper. Let us temporarily set aside the Black Sword for now. What about the other two main assassins of the Brotherhood? Reversed Machete and Prison Lock Sickle? Or Sunza and Rhoda, who are close to Supreme Class? Raphael shook his head helplessly. From the beginning till the end, we did not obtain any news of Reversed Machete and Prison Lock Sickle appearing anywhere nearby, or find any other reinforcements from the Brotherhood. However, Raphael furrowed his brows a little. On the other hand, Morat's gaze became cold and stern. Raphael continued, actually, within this past week, Anton and Rhoda of the 6 powerhouses have returned to Eternal Star City. Apart from Alpha Wolf Fisher, who is still away in the south, Sunza, Rhoda, Lance, Anton and Morris, 5 out of the 6 powerhouses are already gathered in the capital. Morat raised his hand abruptly and stopped Raphael's report. His expression kept changing. After he paused for a few seconds, the Black Prophet exhaled deeply. All 5 of them are gathered together? Poof. Morat closed his eyes as he shook his head. I know who Ramon's helper is, and he is not someone from the Brotherhood. Raphael's eyes showed his confusion. Morat gently opened his eyes, revealing his penetrating gaze. The one who first disclosed information to us was Secret Room, but the Secret Intelligence Department's elite assassination team found nothing at the border of the 2 countries. Is that not obvious? Raphael lifted his head in realization. Morat stayed silent for a long while. The Black Prophet laughed briskly and said, it seems like Ramon is not some sort of wizard after all. That old woman from the north has once again played her tricks on us. But it is not without reason that she used fake news to attract our attention. She was helping the Brotherhood. As for the latter, what were they trying to hide? Withdraw half of the manpower back from the north, and focus on inspecting the Brotherhood's activities during the next few days. There must be a reason for the gathering of the 5 people. Morat could not help but laugh. How dare he make a deal with Extet's Secret Room? Lance, that brat. As expected of my most outstanding disciple apart from Novork. Right at this moment, next to Raphael's hand, a violent, loud noise suddenly came from a cage, which was covered with a piece of black cloth. Raphael opened the cage without any expression on his face. A skull resembling that of a bird and rat, which was roughly the size of a fist, protruded from the cage. It was stained with a bright red, sticky liquid, and its open mouth was filled with sharp teeth. A piece of paper was passed out before it immediately retreated back into the cage. Morat did not look at the sinister, strange, and creepy creature. He just focused his gaze on Raphael. The latter was staring at the small piece of paper as his expression became increasingly sour. Raphael put down the piece of paper, and his face became unprecedentedly serious. We received a report that the two main leaders of Blood Bottle Gang's 8 psionic warriors, Fantasy Blade Edge Catherine and Red Viper Nicholas, appeared at Revolve City one after another. And 2 days ago, our informant at the neighboring Steel City discovered a trace of the blood mystic. Raphael spoke in a solemn tone. Morat's pupils contracted abruptly. It seems like we have caught a big fish. Morat smiled. Raphael muttered to himself, but, surprisingly, he is hidden in Steel City. It has been so many years. Did the dwarfs of the Hall of Kings Chronicles not have a clue about this? Morat closed his eyes as he shook his head. Over the past 300 years, the relationship between the Hall of Kings Chronicles and Empress Helen worsened because of the Sunset Goddess. Even more so, when the Blazing Wind Cannon oddly fell into cooling mode. They did not have any usable legendary anti-mystic equipment on their hands. Even if they knew, they could only pretend to be ignorant about it. Raphael raised his eyebrows and snorted lightly in response. Are you certain that it is the blood mystic? What is the specific report? The Black Prophet held onto his staff in his hands a little tighter as he replied gravely. However, he immediately noticed Raphael's sorrowful expression as Raphael sighed. The young man dressed in white lowered his gaze and opened the piece of paper. There is no report, he said solemnly. Morat lifted his head abruptly and his sharp gaze was directed straight at Raphael, waiting for his explanation. The young man dressed in white exhaled as he replied faintly, the reason why we were able to discover the blood mystic was because all 34 informants along the way from Steel City to Revolve City died, Raphael said quietly. Furthermore, their flesh was scattered in all directions, and none of their bodies were fully intact. It matches the blood mystic style in our records. He did not continue. After a while, Morat sighed deeply. It is putting up a show to the Secret Intelligence Department that outside the capital, it can find every single one of us whenever it wants, he spoke with his hoarse voice. Indeed, it is that damned, homicidal maniac. Chapter 75, The Union of Two Kings Renaissance Palace. Thud, thud, thud. An urgent sound of footsteps came from beyond the door. It was the noise made by high-heeled leather boots stepping on stone ground. Boom! The thick door to the bedroom was abruptly pushed open. What exactly is wrong with you? An angry, agitated, but crisp female voice could be heard loud and clear. The maid who was sweeping the floor at the side was so frightened that she immediately lowered her head as she rushed out from the bedroom door. From her peripheral vision, she saw His Majesty's lover, the first great female official, the once influential lady of the capital, the legendary police officer whose exciting life story, filled with ups and downs, could be written into a collection of poems by a bard, Jins Baskovic. At this very moment, this formidable-looking female official was in a rage as she walked into the room. She was yelling angrily at Kessel V, who was standing by the windowsill. Do you really want to murder your own son? In front of the window, the king was looking down at the mass of people below Renaissance Palace. Kessel V slowly turned around. As a king, I have to do this. That is all, the dignified voice replied. Slap. A resounding sound of a slap could be heard behind the maid. The maid did not dare dawdle around any longer and she exited the room, drenched in cold sweat. He is not only a prince, but is also your flesh and blood. He is not the one who destroyed the Jade Star royal family, or the person behind the scheme to harm Constellation. Jins was extremely furious, and did not show any sign of being aware that she had just ferociously slapped the Supreme King of Constellation. In a daze, Kessel V stroked the cheek where he was struck. An image of the dashing timely police officer with an amazing presence in the past appeared before his eyes. As well as the first time they met. She had also greeted him with a slap in the face, did she not? But the Supreme King came back to his senses and said nonchalantly, such a coincidence, Yodel also made a similar comment about that boy. That boy? Jin stared in disbelief at the king. That is your only son. Yes, my only son. Kessel's eyes were flickering with complicated emotions. He took in a deep breath before slowly exhaling. That is why I have already chosen the best path for him, the trials that a kingdom heir must endure and tolerate. Jin's furrowed brows reflected her struggles as she stared at this robust man in front of her. Kessel V inhaled deeply, his eyes were cold like frost. How can he qualify to be a true king if he has not experienced real hell? Jin's heart trembled. Jin sighed deeply. Kay, we have to learn to get used to or even forget some matters. The king sneered with an expressionless face. Is that so? He took a step forward and stared directly at Jin's. I have heard the news from Gilbert, that you encountered the assassins on the way to Renaissance Palace. Can you truly get used to or even forget those matters? Jin's entire frame trembled as she stared at Kessel with a complicated look. Jins raised her trembling hand and placed it upon Kessel's shoulder. She caressed his red, swollen face and said painfully as well as miserably, Kay, you cannot live in the past forever. She clenched her teeth lightly and said, please. Kessel V trembled from head to toe as he looked into Jin's watery eyes and pleading gaze. Grief emerged in his heart. He quietly replied, the past is already history. What I see now is only the future. Past. Future. Really? Jin's gently clenched her teeth as a young and adorable boy appeared before her eyes. A sting appeared at the back of her eyes, and she almost cried. The king unconsciously clenched his fist tight when he saw Jin's reaction. Then he clenched his teeth tightly and closed his eyes resolutely. As for that boy, Thales, you do not have to worry about him. I will prepare everything for him, everything that a Jade Star needs. He will never, never become the next Lydia or Luther. Jin's hand trembled slightly. She lowered her head and put on a miserable smile. You know, in this past 20 years, I have gone through numerous interrogations and seen countless meaningful gazes. She gently wrapped her arms around Kessel's waist and leaned into the king's wide embrace. The female official miserably said, all of the Jade Stars, whether it was my dear or Horus, or even King 80, their eyes were always filled with vigilance, apathy and struggles, regardless of whether those emotions were directed to this world or to themselves. And now. She leaned against the king's chest and continued with a pained expression on her face. After that year, your eyes became the same as theirs. Kessel's eyes were filled with sorrow when he heard the names of his two elder brothers and the former king. But his eyes are different. I can feel that he is different from each and every one of you. It is also a gaze that is not usually seen on a 7-year-old boy. The king sighed. That is because that boy has yet to go through what I have experienced. Jins quietly said, even if his mother was that kind of existence. In that moment, Jins could feel the strong body she was leaning against become momentarily rigid. The king suddenly wrapped his arms tightly around Jins as he replied with his teeth clenched and his expression full of pain, you can be rest assured, Jins, that he will be alright. He will be safe. He will survive. Since he is a Jade Star and also the descendant of the royal family, more so, the son of that woman, he will be able to survive even in hell. Not to mention, this is merely Extet. Kill me in order to take revenge on behalf of Prince Moriah and eliminate King Nuven's hatred. That is what His Majesty said so, right? Thales walked into the hall at the ground floor and looked at Gilbert, signaling to the staff in the scullery as he continued. It seems like Extet is a very dangerous place. After all, we have an old grudge over the Fortress Treaty and after that, their diplomatic group was attacked by the assassins, in which their common elected king's only son and heir was killed. King Nuven is extremely angry right now, and Extet's suzerains are also thirsting after our territory. Under such circumstances, the Prince of Constellation is practically a sheep among a pack of wolves. Thales let out a long sigh. But is my current condition any better than going on a diplomatic mission to Extet in the future? Gilbert was slightly stunned. As the only heir of Jade Star, since birth, I am already standing on the opposite side against all major suzerains. Look at Nanchester, look at Covendir, not to mention the newly imprisoned Arundi. After all, if I ever run into any accidents, they will have a chance to seize the throne. Thales walked onto a flight of stairs and walked past the portrait of the three kings of Constellation. His eyes reflected his absent-minded state. Before I appeared, their focus was on His Majesty, but after I appeared, I was destined to be the new target. Even with Renaissance Palace's strength and power, my safety as well as security can never be ensured. There is a proverb from the Far East that says, a long spear from the front is easy to evade, but a cold arrow from the shadows is hard to fend against. Comparatively, the suzerains of Extet may want to take advantage of Constellation. Perhaps, they are not happy to see me, but it is not a must for them to kill me. On the contrary, no matter who stains his hands with the blood of Constellation's prince will be destined to become the public's target for attack. The whole of Constellation will become his enemy. The devoted ones will want to take revenge on behalf of the royal family, and the ambitious ones will want to gain a righteous reputation. Extet adopts the king selection system. After the demise of the last elected king, the 10 archdukes will choose the next common elected king during the King Selection Congress to rule for the rest of his life. Every single archduke has a chance and every one of them are competing for it. Extet is even worse than Constellation when it comes to their internal divide. Maybe Constellation's power has not yet fully recovered and it does not have enough strength to overtake Extet. But under the temptation of the crown, working together to crush an Extet suzerain will still be more than possible. Also, the other suzerains of Extet will probably gleefully watch by the side and do nothing to see the downfall of their competitor in the King Selection Congress. As people from the Far East will say, I am just like a can of worms. No matter which Extet suzerain has me in their territory, not only are they unable to harm me, for their own benefits, they even have to do their best in protecting me. Gilbert raised his eyebrows. It seemed like he had been worrying too much. After all, he could tell that His Highness was mature and sensible after many days spent together with him. He was not the type of person who needed other people to worry over him. And so, the only person left that I have to worry about in Extet is King Nuven. Thales walked into the study room and watched the guards bring in his lunch. He smiled at Gilbert, whose eyebrows had smoothened out in obvious relief. However, this is something that many people may overlook. When Prince Moriah died in Constellation, King Nuven was already destined to be an ally of Jade Star royal family and myself. Gilbert finally had a smile on his face. Thales yawned and sat down on the chair in his study room. He pushed away the messy books and notes on his desk, which he spent the last night reading through, and said confidently, under a situation where there is no direct male heir, Constellation allows female heirs to inherit the father's title, territory, and assets. Our Duchess of Blade Edge Hill is someone who is like that. But in Extet, females have no right of inheritance. Since the old King Nuven has lost his only male heir, it means that the inheritance in Dragoncloud City will become a problem. The Walton family already has no chance in the next selection of the king. They are destined to head into decline. Under these circumstances, maybe it will relieve King Nuvan's pain and hatred in losing his only son by declaring war towards Constellation, or killing an heir of equivalent importance like me. However, after he calms down, he will realize that this will only lead to the Walton family's final destruction. The possible territories that can be gained through battle or negotiation with Constellation will all be received by our neighboring 3 archdukes at Southern Extet, the Archduke of Black Sand, the Archduke of Prestige Orchid, and the Archduke of Reformation Tower. Those 3 archdukes are the most popular candidates for the next King Selection Congress. Even though the territories gained under these circumstances will belong to the Walton family as their land, it will be taken by the 3 archdukes in the near future because the lands are far too close to the 3 of them. It also means that, in the conflict between Constellation and the Dragon, the 3 archdukes who are the greatest beneficiaries will become stronger. As for the Waltons who have already lost their direct heir, they will only become increasingly weaker under King Nuvan, and they will eventually perish. Under this situation, King Nuvan will only try his best to avoid any conflict between Constellation and the Dragon, regardless if it is war or negotiation. He will not let any one of Constellation's territories or resources fall into the hands of the 3 southern archdukes. That is the only way to maintain even power among Extet's 10 archdukes, and to ensure that the weakening Walton family does not head to its own downfall. Also, is there any other huge kingdom other than Constellation, hailed as Western Peninsula's shield, or any other famous, prosperous, and powerful family other than the Jade Star royal family, which is a more fitting ally in seizing the attention of the 3 southern archdukes as well as exerting pressure upon them? In treating Constellation or the Jade Star royal family as their natural ally, plus ensuring the recovery of our strength so that we become even stronger and more powerful than before, only the Walton family can be assured of the continuation of their family and a chance in the next king selection. Under such a scenario, them and us, the Walton family and Jade Star royal family's benefits are unprecedentedly the same. Walton and Jade Star are already natural allies. Presumably, the act of letting King Nuvan kill me is only the king's shocking method to let the other party cool down. After King Nuvan's fury is quenched, mutual understanding will grow and sprout in King Nuvan as well as King Kessel's hearts at the same time. There will be no need for an agreement, no need for an oath and no need for a negotiation. This is the natural treaty. A treaty that belongs to Cloud Dragon Spear Flag's Walton family and 9-pointed Star Flag's Jade Star family, the union of 2 kings. Thales sighed deeply. The Battle of Eradication's 2 outstanding human heroes, Raikaru and Tormund's respective descendants. How ironic that the 2 kingdoms are sincerely working together only when the 2 kingdoms are unprecedentedly hostile towards each other. Thus, it could be seen just how immature the 2 feudalistic nations, Constellation and the Dragon were. In a world full of many illogical technologies, it was still apparently a feudal society. On the surface, the highest ruler had authority over foreign affairs and military affairs, but in reality, the highest ruler was skating on thin ice and had to be very alert, being in a life or death struggle with territorial suzerains. The state's autonomy is truly pathetically limited and painfully weak. The prince put away his past memory and lifted his head while he continued his speech. And so, compared to Constellation that is seemingly peaceful but in reality, very dangerous due to the threats lurking in every corner, Extet that is seemingly dangerous and hostile but is actually safe and secure is the best place for me to go. This should be the true intention of His Majesty. Hopefully. Thales added, at the bottom of his heart. The image of the expressionless king appeared before his eyes. After all, I cannot see affection in the king's eyes. He snapped back to his senses and said with a smile on his face, and so, I, as a representative of the Jade Star royal family, may encounter King Nuvan's test in Dragoncloud City. Maybe some mean people will deliberately make things difficult for me, maybe I will be ridiculed by the suzerains and become their bargaining chip in confronting Constellation. I may even face conspiracies from different forces with different motives. However, it is still safer for me to be there than to be in Constellation. In the next second, Thales' eyes shone brilliantly with intense confidence and affirmation. Therefore, I will survive. Gilbert started to chuckle. However, in the next moment, he immediately lifted his head and said seriously, since you think of it that way, Your Highness, I have nothing to worry about anymore. I came here today to discuss the candidates for your diplomatic group, and also the candidates for your attendance. Thales nodded. Gilbert bowed slightly. But before that, Your Highness, there is someone who would like to meet you. Meet me? Thales had just picked up his knife and fork. He raised his brows when he heard of Gilbert's request. To meet me at this very moment? Thales nonchalantly picked up a piece of potato and put it into his mouth. If the person is attracted by my fame and wishes to see the last of Jade Star's prince with similar interest as looking at a rare animal, please reject the request on my behalf. Be more polite in your wording, I have already offended way too many people. However, Gilbert shook his head. No, I think this person is one of the very few people who want to visit you regardless of your identity as a prince. In fact, a little over a month, he has been recuperating from his wounds in the barracks located at the back. Are you saying? Thales seemed to recall something as he lifted his head in astonishment. Thud. These sounds came from outside the study room. Gilbert nodded and lamented. He suffered such serious injuries, and could only eat with the help of tubes. Even the doctors thought that he would not survive, but his will to live is indeed astonishing, and we never had a shortage of medication as well as drugs. Gilbert cleared the path to the entrance of the study as he sighed slightly. Come in, this is the person that you insisted to meet. The second prince of Constellation, Prince Thales Jade Star. Thales placed down his cutleries and furrowed his brows tightly together. The person's left hand was wrapped in thick bandages and secured with a wooden plank. He was holding onto a pair of crutches, and his actions showed that he was clearly unfamiliar with it. He could be seen limping into Thales' room with strenuous effort. There was a horrible scar of knotted flesh on his throat and his legs were only to his knees. Even though he had stubbles on his face, and his entire figure had become terribly thin, and he had even gotten a haircut and the tattoo on his face had faded a lot, Thales still managed to recognize him immediately. The man who once wept in despair, but had now recovered from his serious injuries. Phantom Wind Follower. My dear Ralph. Chapter 76, Toad We're With You. Ralph was once the hope of Blood Bottle Gang, the only superclass elite among the strongest 12. After going through hell and despair, he finally met Thales again after a month. Congratulations, you struggled through it in the end. Thales smiled and nodded. You didn't lose to this damned world. Ralph trembled slightly and opened his mouth abruptly. His throat, which was a mesh of blood and flesh, trembled slightly. However, he could only mutter a bunch of indecipherable grunts. He also knew that he was unable to say anything now. In such a situation, Thales did not know how to react for a moment. He scratched his head. It's okay, if you have anything to say, just write it down with a pen. Ralph's gaze dimmed. We have tried. Gilbert sighed. He is illiterate. Apart from numbers, he is not even able to write his own name. Hearing this, Ralph closed his eyes in shame. He lowered his head even more. Thales felt a little awkward. He almost forgot that Ralph earned a living by being in a gang. Thales, who used to be a child beggar, knew that most people who joined gangs had an unfortunate life. They did not have much chance to receive a proper education because they were busy earning a living through illegal activities every day. But in the next moment, to Thales' astonishment, Ralph gritted his teeth, supported himself with his crutch with difficulty, and then lowered his disabled body. Before the small and weak Thales, he made a deep bow. Thales sighed. All right, I have received your thanks. Ralph raised his head and his body was trembling. He looked at Thales. What are your plans after this? Do you have anywhere else you can go? I don't really suggest that you return to Blood Bottle Gang. Ralph trembled slightly. Back to Blood Bottle Gang? Back under Big Sister, Catherine's wings? Looking at his own legs, a pained expression appeared on his face. And then there's Nicholas. Thinking of his foe who had stabbed him from the back, Ralph's eyes shone with a brilliant light. A few seconds later, Ralph exhaled with his psionic ability and dejectedly shook his head. Thales stared intently at him. All right then. The prince flashed a smile. Then you can stay at my place for the time being, we can probably afford to keep you. Ralph's eyes brightened up. This boy, apart from being his lifesaver, he also had a very socially influential status. Thales turned his head and looked towards Count Queso. Gilbert, how much time do we have until we depart for Rexdet? Gilbert smiled as he spoke. It depends on the time the messenger crow takes to reach and contact Dragoncloud City. It will be at least 3 days and at most a week, Your Highness. That should be enough. Thales nodded and looked at Ralph. During these few days, come to my study room during the day. Ralph looked surprised. The confident and optimistic boy, who let him choose between freedom and struggle when he was in a hopeless predicament, flashed a smile. I will teach you how to read and write, and how to speak with hand gestures. The captain of the city defense team who was affiliated to Eastern City District Police Station, the 31-year-old Gennard laid in the dungeon of Vine Manor. He was panting. His body was covered in wounds. He was bound in heavy shackles and could not move. But a voice inside his heart told him that he must not open his mouth. No matter how the followers of these great nobles tortured and beat him up, no matter how they threatened and tried to bribe him. No matter how much they wanted to know about the background of those cavaliers that appeared outside Vine Manor that night at Eastern City District, he must keep his lips sealed. After the national conference ended, Gennard was discharged from his duty of maintaining order in Star Plaza. The very next day, his boss came to his site of duty in Eastern City District with a group of police officers. His boss read out Gennard's offenses in front of him and all the soldiers under him. Somebody reported him for being engaged in corruption while he was on duty in Eastern City District. Gennard immediately sighed. It was not because this was a false accusation. Instead, it was because in Eastern City District, the act of receiving gratuities from nobles had long since been a universally acknowledged custom and common practice. Every single soldier from the city defense team, and even the police officers, would collect this kind of tip. The police station was also well aware of this. Every time, they would receive commissions and reap some profits. This was also the only extra income Gennard could obtain for his teammates, whose wages were extremely low. Why was he the only one who was reported? The faces of the soldiers under him were also filled with shock. However, Gennard, who had been hanging around Eastern City District for almost 12 years now, knew that he must have offended an important personage. Under the hostile gazes of 10 police officers, Gennard only had enough time to give his treasured saber, which he had kept in good condition for 12 years, and which he could never bear to be apart from, to the subordinate that showed the most promise in his team. That saber was a present that was casually given to him by the Duke of Star Lake after the major retreat from Walla Passage as he saw that Gennard did not have any weapons. Take this as an exchange for the flower in your hands. Thanks to you, at least we can have a good meal, Duke John. There was even the 9-pointed star emblem on it. With his hands and legs chained and head covered, he was then brought to a manor by carriage. The carriage took many turns, but Gennard had patrolled Eastern City District for over 10 years. The habit he cultivated from his days as a soldier in the Starlight Brigade to observe and remember the roads was also never abandoned. How could he not recognize that this was the Covendier family's Vine Manor, which he passed by 3 times each day during patrols? A group of people, who obviously used to be soldiers, tortured Genard for 2 full days for no other reason than wanting to ask about the group of cavaliers who burst into Eastern City District that night, and had even possibly broken into Covendier family's Vine Manor. They wanted to ask about the origins of those cavaliers. However, Genard must not tell them. He must not tell them. There was no other reason than because the group of cavaliers were under the 9-pointed star. They were from the Jade Star royal family. That was John's 9-pointed star. The Duke of Star Lake's 9-pointed star. Starlight Brigade's 9-pointed star. That was the 9-pointed star the once ignorant Genard fought under tirelessly while burning with righteous ardor. There were so many of his battle companions under that flag. 12 years ago, he had once roamed about the battle-stricken land numbly. He went through cold, hunger, pain, and suffering. Every day, in a daze, he witnessed murder, arson, rape, and robbery. That was until Genard foolishly entered the city. Just as he was so hungry that his head was dizzy and his eyes blurred, he had ignorantly walked towards the army enlistment office. Then, he met the witty, confident, optimistic, and friendly Duke of Star Lake and his Starlight Brigade. He was a 19-year-old young man from a peasant family who was often bullied, was foolish ignorant, and lacked the means to survive. In Starlight Brigade, he learned for the first time how to work together with others, he understood how it was like to sacrifice himself selflessly, he was accepted and praised, he was taught to read and write, he raised his sword and cried out in celebration of victory, he sang joyfully around a campfire, he made the decision to act as the rear guard for his comrades. He also understood for the first time that in the world, there existed more important things than to be well-fed and to keep living. There, he felt more like a human instead of a barbaric beast who only cared about looking for food and satisfying his hunger. The Duke's team of personal guards and the Starlight Brigade was his home, the place he belonged to, and his everything. It was a place where he thought he would fight bravely for the rest of his life. That was until the tragedy in Zodra, that disgraceful and detestable betrayal, that contemptible and lowly surprise attack, that cowardly stab in the back. That was until the Duke calmly laid among all the members of his team of personal guards. Amid the entire brigade's regretful and furious wails, the Duke earnestly advised them to take care of themselves. He then smiled with tears in his eyes, closed his eyes, and left forever. This was the team of personal guards' fault. This was their sin. If we had realized sooner at that time, if I reacted a bit sooner, then the Duke wouldn't have, our home wouldn't have. Therefore, when the soldiers from the noble family scornfully insulted him, interrogated him, beat him, and threatened him to have him reveal the identity of those cavaliers who were also under the 9-pointed star, Genard felt that his refusal to yield, his perseverance, silence, and even the injuries that covered his entire body, to the point where he was barely alive, were all a type of atonement. At least, this would slightly soothe his soul that had been feeling guilt, regret, and self-blame for the past 12 years. It enabled him to, more or less, atone and repent after these 12 years, where he lost all interest in life and felt extremely numb. It was all for the place he once called home. For his responsibility as a member of the team of personal guards to the Duke who may be gone but will always be remembered by Genard. My master just wants to confirm some things. The white-haired old man was calmly inquiring from outside the jail cell door again. He just wants to know about the identity of those cavaliers. That is all. I swear in my master's honor that he is not planning to harm those cavaliers. Genard gritted his teeth and kept quiet. Who would see your persistence? Similarly, no one would see your weakness either. You just have to give us some information. Just a little. No one will know. Genard continued to keep his lips shut tight. We know that you definitely know something. All your soldiers said that they had no flag nor emblem. So, are they people you know? Were they once your comrades, or friends who you would sacrifice your life for? Gerald still kept his mouth shut. The white-haired old man sighed and left the dungeon. Genard relaxed his jaws. Panting, he crumpled down onto the floor. He made it through again. However, unknown to him, Ashford, the old butler of the Covendier family, headed to the top floor of Vine Manor. He respectfully bowed to his young master, the guardian duke of the South Coast, Zayn Covendier. He then said, I have gotten an answer. Those cavaliers belong to the Jadestar family. Zayn turned from the window, which was filled with the smell of blood. His expression was a contemplative one. I thought that he kept refusing to say anything no matter what. Ashford said expressionlessly, for some things, we can obtain answers even if the other party does not say anything. Genard used to be in the Starlight Brigade and was even a member of the personal guards belonging to John Jadestar, the Duke of Star Lake and also the Starlight God of War. After Sonia Sasir dismissed the original Starlight Brigade, as one of the people who refused to travel north to the Broken Dragon Fortress, he retired and became a police officer. Zayn's gaze flickered around, as if deep in thought. Ashford nodded slightly. It is obvious that he is an outstanding and strong soldier. If there is something about those cavaliers that made him keep quiet no matter what, it is most probably related to the things he experienced when he was serving in the military. I believe that with his rich experience as part of the brigade and in expeditions, he saw through the background of those cavaliers with no flag or banner. Due to the camaraderie he formed with those who were also from the Jadestar family when he was in Starlight Brigade, he insisted on keeping their identities a secret. Zayn stared at his old butler for a few seconds. In the end, he sighed. So, the only ones that fit the description is the Jadestar private army from Mindy's Hall, and after yesterday, the new prince directly returned to Mindy's Hall before the public eye. So, he's the royal treasure missing from Mindy's Hall? Zayan shook his head and chuckled softly. Humph, I'm afraid that the so-called royal treasure that went missing from Mindy's hall before this was that new prince. Nicholas captured that brat and brought him to Vine Manor, that was why they simply broke in and snatched him back in secret. Ashford, did you know that we held the kingdom's fate in our hands twice? Twice. Zayan raised his head and shut his eyes tight. In the end, every time, we let him escape. Ashford calmly lowered his head and did not speak. After a long while. Treat the injuries of that soldier from Starlight Brigade, Zayan said coldly. Ashford raised his gaze. It carried hints of puzzlement. You know, no matter what, I owe that brat one. Zayan clenched his fists tightly as he spoke, his eyes blazing with fury. And I do not want to hesitate when I take action against him. Without hesitation, Zayan turned and left the manor, which smelled heavily of blood. Did you know, sir? Behind him, Ashford flashed a mysterious smile. You are more and more like the previous duke. Without turning his head, Zayan scornfully replied, and be as foolish as him, with relatives plotting against me behind my back to have my throat cut in my own bedroom without realizing it? Ashford shook his head slightly and sighed deeply. He lowered his head and reported another matter. Sir, there was news from Jade City, Lady Hill. Ashford glanced at his master's expression. He looked as if he wanted to continue, but hesitated. Zayan stopped walking. The young duke sucked in a breath, as if he was preparing for something. His tone was ice-cold. Go ahead and speak. What ridiculous thing has my adorable but foolish 12-year-old sister done again? Hearing this, Ashford bowed deeply and carefully said, Miss Hill has already departed for Sarah Dukedom 5 days ago, protected by Lord Cassine. None of the followers dared to stop her. Zayan turned his head and looked at Ashford. He put on a bewildered expression, furrowed his brows and said, Sarah? The Sarah Dukedom that became scattered and disunited after the Archduke was assassinated? Is that place not troubled by a plague recently? Ashford bowed slightly. The reason she gave to the public was that she wanted to aid the people, who are deeply troubled by the plague. However, your humble servant suspects that she found information about that organization. That organization? Zayan's expression immediately became frost-cold. His face twitched, as if he was thinking of something that he could not tolerate. Until he suddenly emitted an outburst, is it not enough that she has caused her own parents' deaths? The Duke's voice was filled with fury and hatred. What sort of disaster does she still want to bring back to the Covendiers? Ashford did not speak. After more than 10 seconds, Zayan sighed heavily. In the end, he still swung his arm to show that he wanted to make an order. Dispatch more men and ensure her safety. Zayan shut his eyes tight and gritted his teeth. He angrily said, and ensure that her identity is kept a secret. It absolutely cannot be revealed. His voice trembled, and he repeated absolutely 3 times. Ashford nodded slightly and considerately left the hall of the manor before the Duke. After the butler was a distance away, Zayan trembled as he held on to a pillar. Bang! He punched the pillar hard. After that, the Duke of Tricolor Iris Flowers leaned his head against the pillar. He exhaled in anguish. The oversight and failure before this, there cannot be a second time. I must not fail. Must not fail. I must become king. I must. Only by becoming the supreme king, only by taking control of all the power in Constellation, or else, Hill. Who else in the world can protect you? Who else can protect such a person like you? Mindy's Hall, the cellar. Congratulations, my Olwe, Prince Thales, the second prince. Serena, the silver-haired, red-eyed lowly of over 400 years old and a refugee from the Night Kingdom, looked at Thales with a complicated expression. We could clearly hear the cheers in Star Plaza from here. Thales narrowed his eyes as he spoke in resignation. This is a bit too much, the distance from here to Star Plaza. All in all, our alliance has moved a step closer to its aim. Without blushing at all, Thales had his suspicions on whether she even had the ability of blushing. Serena cut him off and continued speaking. Now, we will wait for the time you are crowned as king. Then, you can help me regain my throne. Do not worry, I will do everything in my power to help you. Under the everlasting lamp, Thales' face became steely. Do everything in your power to help me? She's talking as though I am not the only heir to the kingdom, and without her help, I won't be able to inherit the kingdom. On the contrary, her competitor and opponent, the Weeper or something from the Night Kingdom, the Night Queen. Thales could only feel a headache coming. He spat mentally, this calculative, scheming old witch who does everything she can to profit off others. Me being crowned, and you regaining your throne? Old witch, can we change the order? But in the end, he did not voice his complaints. Thales let out a fake cough. Then, you must have heard that I am heading to Extet soon. Serena nodded and flashed a mysterious smile. This mortal brat. Did you think that I don't know what you are planning? Before I leave, I will entrust you all to, my father. Thales carefully chose his words. I will go with you. Thales continued nodding, thinking of what to say next. You are after all, an important member of another kingdom's government, he definitely will not be a poor host. I only follow you. Thales' voice gradually became softer. What? He furrowed his brows as he spoke in bewilderment. I am saying that I want to be Togdur with you. Serena cracked a smile. This red-eyed girl who looked like she was 6 or 7, didn't she look like she was only 5 or 6 the last time I saw her? Is it possible that she grew slightly? Thales opened her mouth and said with a lisp, we still have anadwar clause which states that you have provided wood to me once every month, do we not? Thales lamented in his heart. Also, allies definitely should not be too far apart from each other, I still need to guarantee your safety. The Prince of Constellation rolled his eyes again. Together with me, it is to guarantee your own safety, isn't it? The thing he was worried about the most had happened, but at that moment, Gilbert's voice rang from outside the door, good day to all three of you, Sir Corleone, and Lady Corleone, you are all truly responsible. Cora, relax a little. Soon after, there was knocking on the door outside the cellar. Count Queso's voice rang from the other side of the door. I apologize for interrupting your discussion, Prince Thales and Archduchess Corleone. However, Extet's reply has arrived, faster than we expected. Chapter 77, Queen, Princess, and Fate, 1. In short, below this line are all daily words starting with the letter P, which I have already explained about just now. If you cannot remember, there are pictures that act as hints on the side. As for why the words starting with the letters PH are not pronounced like this, do not ask me, it is alright for you to just memorize them. Thales' voice resounded in the study room. All of these materials were prepared by Gilbert for me, but now, it seems like my progress has surpassed the level of these materials by a little. However, this is just enough for you to use. Surpassed by a little? Gilbert was looking around at the entrance when he furrowed his brows slightly while he saw Thales passing the word list to Ralph, who was unable to speak. He did not really agree, it could even be said that he firmly opposed it, that during such a critical moment, Thales still spent time on teaching Ralph, even though indeed, no one could replace His Highness in teaching Ralph with his own mysterious yet meaningful set of sign language, to the extent that it interfered with his own studies. However, when he thought of the prince's diplomatic mission to Extet approaching soon, what the prince truly needed was a trusted subordinate, not those complicated and tedious information. Gilbert would then sigh at the thought and continue to stand at the entrance, allowing His Highness to treat his subordinate with courtesy as well as carry out his actions in order to win over support. At least, that seemed like what he was doing from Gilbert's perspective. Extet's written reply had arrived the day prior. But when Baron LaSalle, the seemingly on-edge emergency envoy, showed the contents of the letter, even old Duke Cullen with the best self-control could not help but to furrow his brows tightly together. Compared to the bloody handprints on the first sealed letter of credentials, this current letter seemed more concise and composed. On the letter was King Nuvan's own handwriting. However, there were only 3 extremely strong words. Let him come. No terms and conditions, no declaration, no mention of the two kingdoms' conflict and no comments on Archduke Lampard's actions, there was no other supplementary content in the letter. After Kessel V finished reading the letter, he also remained stoic. He did not express anything, but only gave an official order. After 3 days, the second prince and his diplomatic group shall head north towards Extet, towards Dragoncloud City. Gilbert could not help but feel nervous. After Baron LaSalle conveyed King Nuvan's statement, he was covered in his sweat as he bade his farewell, after which he returned to his home country. Gilbert guessed that the process of meeting His Majesty that day and also LaSalle's performance had probably made their way back to Extet. LaSalle probably would have to make his decision between King Nuvan and Archduke Lampard by the time he returned to his country. While he was thinking, Thales' voice continued to come through. Alright, next, we are going to revise the sign language from just now. How do you express sorry? Ralph furrowed his brows. He was flipping and searching through the papers that were full of pictures beside his hand. He raised his head and lifted his right palm in confusion, then lightly moved it in a circular motion in front of his chest. Incorrect. That is please. You have to clench your palm into a fist, yes, that is sorry got. Ralph clumsily clenched his right fist and moved it in a circular motion in front of his chest. Opposite the phantom wind follower, Thales nodded lightly without even lifting his head. Half of his attention was on Ralph while the other half was focused on his right hand, which was holding a book titled From the Final Empire to Constellation underneath the table. That is right. While Thales was teaching Ralph sign language, he was also flipping and reading what he needed to under the desk. The book was something that he could not let Gilbert know about, especially since it was about calamities, about mystics. Thales was dying to understand these secrets that were related to him. Especially after the last assassination attempt in which he suspected he had used mystic energy. He was constantly deeply concerned about that excruciating pain, which felt like it could almost rip his whole body apart. Would it be his time of death the next time he used mystic energy? But as if he was pushed by fate, from the national conference to the meeting of Extet's diplomats, then being sent onto a diplomatic mission, there was no time for him to stop and investigate the truth about himself and the mystics. If Extet's matter had not been that urgent, and this was added on with Ralph's arrival, Thales would have had an excuse to shorten his daily classes with Gilbert. Thus, he could use that extra time to teach Ralph sign language. It was impossible for him to read these materials that would trigger suspicion during Gilbert's classes. He also wanted to be open about his curiosity towards mystics in exchange for a chance to find information about the mystics without hiding. However, who knew if the books he read would have been recorded down and passed to Kessel, or even passed to Morat? So, he could only disguise his motives in his daily life. He stole time to investigate his own secret, just like he did today. As for the excruciating pain after he lost control during the assassination attempt in front of the palace, it made Thales even more worried and alarmed. How many more abnormalities did his body have? When would these abnormalities expose his own secrets? Thales had a premonition that every secret lay within his origins, including the secrets on his mysterious mother, the head ritual master, Lycia's deeply confidential and peculiar attitude, the suspicious conversation between the king and the head ritual master during the Bloodline ceremony, and other things. The truth about my mother was listed as number 2 by Thales in his list, the 5 big unsolved mysteries about me. Its ranking was before Bloody Year, flashbacks, and also abnormal body, and only below the most pressing matter, the mystery of mystics. He had to save himself in this dangerous world. Thales could not help but sigh when he came to that thought. What about thank you? How do you make that sign? He simply asked. Ralph searched for that piece of picture with much difficulty, and clumsily used the tip of his right palm to gently touch his chin. He then flipped his hand with his palm facing outwards. Thales' gaze flickered between Ralph and the book. Right at this very moment, his eyesight started to blur again. Wu Qiren's voice echoed in his ears. Miss, are you going to the special school again to be a volunteer for the disabled? Yes. Ah, do not use such a derogatory term while addressing them. They are not disabled or ill. Every time you address them in this manner, you are isolating them from normal society. You should use terms such as people with physical obstructions or people with physical inconveniences. Hey, I have always thought that you should focus on your degree, instead of spending your time on this matter so that you can be of an influence from the plane of social construct and upgrade special education. After all, you alone are not enough. The inconveniences they face in their daily lives will not become better with your occasional actions. This is not the way to change society. Wu Qiren. It is not their fault that they encounter inconveniences in their lives. In fact, it is because of people in the society like us, who do not fulfill our responsibilities of enabling every single person to live in society without obstacles regardless of his or her condition. If we can be considerate and design individual washrooms for children with heights below 120 centimeters in order for them to live without obstacles in this society, so why can we not let a deaf or mute person communicate with others without any barriers and let them live without obstructions in this society? When did you become a person with such morals that only those from social sciences would have? This is not morals but fundamental values. Your claims that the right way of promoting society's improvement stems from a holistic structure is problematic. I do not believe that someone who does not even bother to sympathize and help the surrounding community will make genuine contributions towards the society. I am talking about you, Wu Qiren. Stop. This serious conversation ends here, we shall depart now. Where to? I am sending you to the special school. Didn't you say wanted to become a volunteer? Ah. Wu Qiren. Are you going too? You have definitely been influenced by my brimming integrity, am I right? You are going to learn sign language with me, it's a deal. I am just sending you over to. I do not care. You have to be with me. Otherwise, you are not allowed to enter my room tonight. Thales shook his head with all of his strength to once again hide those few profound, deeply impressionable but untouchable memories of the past at the back of his brain. He shifted his focus back to the present. Not bad, let us increase the degree of difficulty. Try it again, no, what I meant was how do you gesture the sign language of try it again? Thales flipped 2 pages of From the Final Empire to Constellation while Ralph was covered with sweat, searching for the drawing. The value of this book was lower than the last book. Basically, the book consisted of a compilation of fictional legends and long-winded chronicles of major events. The book failed to describe the calamities in the Battle of Eradication clearly. It was just like how ordinary people treated the Battle of Eradication, a boring program in Dark Knight Temple. Many people even believed that the world was originally made up of 2 peninsulas. Thales furrowed his brows. A piece of paper fell out from a wedge between 2 pages of the thick book. Thales gently picked up the piece of paper. The color of the old parchment was already faded. That particular paper seemed older than the old From the Final Empire to Constellation book he was holding, where turning its pages itself was already being a huge problem for him despite it being remarkably maintained. The side profile of a teenage girl was drawn onto the parchment with an erasable black pen. The young girl in the drawing seemed gentle and graceful. She was smiling pleasantly and her plain face was pure like a lotus flower. She had a multi-pointed star earring hanging down from her left ear. Was this piece of paper, which was obviously older than the book, randomly used as a bookmark by one of the people from the older generation? Thales had a puzzled expression on his face. He moved his gaze downwards and discovered a signature. T-C-A-K-A-J. Those 4 letters were probably the initials of the painter. Just as Ralph was clumsily gesturing the sign, Thales flipped the parchment over and saw a word scrawled on the back. Enemy. The word ended with a huge exclamation mark. Thales shook his head, unable to make sense of its meaning. Gilbert's voice suddenly came through. Your Highness, sorry to interrupt you. Thales remained calm and collected as he stuffed the parchment into his bosom. He closed the book and secretly kicked it to an unremarkable corner. The prince lifted his head and smiled towards Gilbert. His Majesty has just sent news. Gilbert tipped his hat towards Thales as he bowed down slightly. He hopes that you will make a trip to Renaissance Palace before you depart, so that the family gathering of the royal family members will be whole. Family gathering? Thales opened his mouth in shock. What family? Aren't the Jade Stars already? At this very moment, the figure of the first-grade female official appeared behind Gilbert. Just follow me, Jin said faintly. Her gaze towards Thales was filled with pity and lament. Renaissance Palace. Jins was walking in her high-heeled boots while leading Thales, who was already dressed, up the cold stone stairs. Since you have already been recognized as a prince, you have to meet your mother in name. Even though she is not your biological mother, but at least, before you leave for Extet. Her voice was cold when she said this. Thales asked in astonishment, what mother? Your father's only wife, of course. Jins's face was clouded with unbearable sorrow. Queen Kia. Thales was stunned for a few seconds. They stopped outside of a palace room. His Majesty is too busy, so he will not come over today. Jin stared at the closed door and whispered. Deep doubt crept into Thales' heart. He could not even attend his own family gathering? Is he just letting his newfound son meet the queen by himself? But Jin's mind was apparently not on this father-son pair. At the next moment, the female official said towards the puzzled Thales in a serious and solemn tone, no matter what happens later, do not be surprised or afraid. Before Thales could come back to his senses from his absent-minded state, Jins had already pushed the door open and walked into the room. Jins cautiously said, Kia, I am here. Thales followed behind the female official as he slowly stepped into the room. The wide room was decorated in a simple manner, but it had its own unique style that gave out an elegant aura. A lady who was probably in her 40s stood before them. Her fresh face was soft and elegant, and she was dressed in a luxurious star blue gown. She turned around to look at Jins and Thales. Jins, here you are. This gorgeous lady, Queen Kia, gave out a genuine and delighted smile. This is wonderful. Recently Kessel has been so busy over the diplomatic relations with Extet, and I thought you would probably be busy too. Thales was slightly reserved. After all, he was the king's illegitimate child. At the same time, he was also surprised over the current scene. If Jins was the king's lover, then why would Kia get along so well with her as the queen? I mentioned this to you before, this person who would come and meet you today. Jins paused for a moment, as though she felt like there was no need for her to talk about this too much. Hence, she took a deep breath and pulled Thales forward as she said silently, this is Thales, Kessel's second son. That means, you are the one? Kia slowly walked towards Thales and crouched down slightly in front of him. Kessel's youngest son? Her gentle eyes looked straight at Thales. Thales felt like he could not breathe properly due to his awkwardness. Her Majesty the Queen stroked his head with an affectionate expression on her face. Do not be afraid, I am also your family. Look at your eyes and nose, they look exactly the same as your charismatic mother. Thales suddenly stopped breathing and widened his eyes. He could only listen to Queen Kia's gentle and sincere voice as she continued, I hope you can also inherit your mother's wits, erudition, and also her smooth eloquence in every endeavor. After all, there are very few females who are as outstanding as her in Jins. Charismatic. Intelligent and an erudite. Eloquent in every endeavor? Thales eagerly kept those information in that specific region named mother in his brain. It was the key for many of the unsolved mysteries about him. Jin's expression became sour as she hastily replied, alright, Kia, if there is nothing important, I still have to bring him around, soon, he will be heading towards Extet. Thales felt strange. Why would Jins be this nervous in front of this gentle and kind queen? Also, why did she want to end this meeting in such a hurry? Oh dear, poor child. Queen Kia sighed. I have never been to Extet, but I have heard about it. That place is uncivilized, crude, and advocates violence as well as battle. You are only so young, I am afraid that you will have to suffer hardship. Thank you for your concern. Even Thales, who was smooth and slick when it came to dealing with people, could hardly withstand a harmonious and happy scene that would only appear in a family with a stranger. His voice was stiff when he replied, no, this is His Majesty's order, this is also Jadestar's mission. Queen Kia chuckled lightly. Jadestar's mission, they always say it that way. Jin suddenly voiced up stiffly, alright, Kia, he has other tasks to complete. We shall leave now. Something's off. Thales furrowed his eyebrows. There must be something wrong. But, which part exactly of this is wrong? Chapter 78, The Queen, the Princess, and Fate, 2. Kia rose and put on a pleasantly surprised expression. No, do not leave so soon. That's right. He has not met his brother and sister yet. Thales' heart shuddered. Kia. Jins cried loudly. Her tone was filled with panic. However, Queen Kia only turned her head back and walked towards the large bed that was a distance away. Lydia and Luther will definitely be very happy to have a younger brother. Thales finally realized what was wrong with this room. His pupils shrank rapidly. The gentle and considerate Queen Kia took out 2 rag dolls from the bed. On the other hand, Jin's face was pale. Look, Luther, this is your younger brother Thales. Quick, say hello. Kia happily played with the rag doll in her left hand. She raised its hand and waved it at Thales, flashing a joyful smile. Thales furrowed his brows hard. While speaking happily, Kia raised the rag doll in her right hand and moved its head towards Thales. And you, Lydia. Sit properly. You cannot be naughty anymore. Quick, greet your younger brother. Kia was even laboriously swaying her own right hand, as if the rag doll in her bosom was struggling intensely. It was truly an extremely bizarre scene. Thales' breathing was starting to become uneven. Could it be that? The prince was in disbelief. This beautiful and elegant queen was playing with the 2 rag dolls in her bosom with a happy expression. This is. Enough, Kia. Jin's breathing was rapid. She walked forward quickly, and the first thing she did was to pull Thales away. But Queen Kia's expression quickly changed. Eh? Why? Kia looked at the rag dolls in her bosom, and then at Thales. Her expression suddenly became very strange, and her tone became a flustered one. Why, Luther, why are you not even as tall as your younger brother, Thales? Thales gritted his teeth and took a step back. The next moment, as if she had seen something unbelievable, Kia's expression became frightened and terrified. Plop! The rag doll in her right hand fell softly on the ground, but it seemed that Queen Kia did not realize it at all. She only looked towards the rag doll in her left hand with a pained expression filled with sadness and despair. She cried, I know. You became shorter because you lack. Gritting her teeth, Jins told Thales, go. Leave first. However, Thales was already so stunned he could not move. Kia gripped onto that rag doll tightly with her hands. After a second, Kia began crying in agony. At the same time, she said something that made Thales absolutely terrified. Luther. Luther, head, you do not have a head. Luther, your head, where is your head? Where did your head go? Ah. Your head fell. Kia raised her tear-filled face and yelled in panic. She laid face down on the ground, looking around and fumbling about. Quick! Quick! We have to look for your head. Watching this, Thales' blood froze. Jins went forward straight away and hugged Queen Kia, stabilizing the trembling queen with great effort. Kia abruptly looked towards Jins with her eyes wide open. You! Have you seen Luther's head? It is about this big, it is round, and rolls, with 2 eyes. Thales watched the scene in front of his eyes in disbelief. Kia abruptly began struggling and waved her arms frantically. Do not stop me. I want to protect him. I want to protect Luther. My son. Jins gritted her teeth, desperately pulling her towards the bed. At that moment, a hand softly held Thales' arm from behind him. Thales jumped in fright. He, having yet to calm down from the fear he felt from what he had witnessed, turned his head abruptly around. The one who held his arm was a stranger, a long-haired woman wearing a black robe and a velvet shawl. This woman in black had a delicate and pretty face, but that face carried a hint of sadness. Panting, Thales finally calmed his breathing. The woman, who wore black and had long hair, held his arm. It is all right, let us leave first. Puzzled, Thales turned towards Jins who was trying hard to subdue Queen Kia. Thales! Jins yelled, gritting her teeth. I will settle the matters here. Leave with the princess first. Quick, get out. The princess? However, before Thales could think much of it, the long-haired woman clad in the velvet dress pulled him out through the door of the room. Behind him, Kia struggled harder and harder. She was yelling madly, guards! Guards! Quick! There are assassins! Assassins! Pulling Thales whose face had paled, the velvet-clad woman quickly walked out, leaving only Kia's desperate voice ringing in the air far away behind them. On both their sides, from time to time, maids and servants with solemn expressions would rush towards Kia's room. It was as though they were used to such a scene. Kia's shrill screams were still ringing in his ears. Sob, my Luther, no. Your head, Sob, why can I not put it back? Why can it not be reattached? Why does it keep falling down? Why? Glue it together. It will be all right if I glue it together. Luther, is this not right? Thales only walked forward with a pale face. He felt that what was happening behind him was too cruel. He did not dare to face it. It was only until Kia's voice disappeared far behind them that the two of them stood still at the corridor. Still in a state of shock, Thales looked behind him. The woman said softly, sorry. Usually, Kia's attacks do not happen so soon. Thales looked behind him in a daze. Puzzlement slowly began appearing in his heart. Thales raised his head and looked towards the woman, then said with great effort, that year, when Luther and Lydia, my brother and sister were assassinated, the queen and the others such as Madame Jins, were they there? Did they witness it with their own eyes? After staying silent for a few seconds, sorrow appeared in the eyes of the woman in black and velvet. She said slowly, yes, that day, Prince Luther was, at the spot. The woman shut her eyes tightly. As she was immersed in her memories, she spoke with some breathing difficulties. Jins and I rushed over after hearing the noise, but we were both too late. It was said that his head rolled under the bed. Princess Lydia was kidnapped. Jins snatched a horse and chased after her. I ran to notify the guards, leaving the stunned Kia alone in the room. Thales exhaled deeply. He suddenly had the answer in his mind. I see. That day, we encountered assassins on the way to Renaissance Palace. Jin's reaction was so abnormal, she even startled the assassins, who were actually not targeting me, ahead of time. Is this the reason why? They all experienced such a scene? This is why Jins lost her composure to that extent, and hated assassins and killers so much. The woman gently smiled at him and said with great sentimentality in her voice, but you do not have to be afraid, Thales, Queen Kia has been like this for many years. When she is sane, she is always hysterical and full of hatred. In contrast, she is quiet and kind during her attacks. She would only think that Luther and Lydia are still beside her, hopping about and playing. The woman's expression slowly became dreary and grim. After the tragedy happened that year, the palace was in chaos. Even King 80 and Prince My Dear were. The guards were so anxious that they drew their swords out whenever they saw someone, so no one was able to care about this place. All the servants had escaped. Only Kia desperately hugged the prince's dead body and refused to let go. It was said that she locked herself in the room. I was forcefully kept apart in the safe house by the guards. The nobles were extremely frightened. They sealed up Renaissance Palace and locked up Eternal Star City. When King Kessel took control of the kingdom and stabilized the situation, it had already been 2 weeks later. The woman sighed and lowered her head. Thales sighed softly. During those 2 weeks, Kia zealously defended the room, hugging the dead Prince Luther and crying, surviving on the water in the vase. After 2 weeks, the prince's dead body had. Following the woman's description, Thales tried to imagine the scene from that time. A chill immediately ran down his back. When they broke open the door to the room 2 weeks later, we saw Kia. She was barely alive and almost unconscious, and in her bosom. The woman heaved a long sigh. Her face was filled with trepidation. That scene was practically like a nightmare. Thales swallowed, not daring to imagine the scene anymore. For Jade Star royal family, the bloody year was something like this? To live for Constellation, is this the price? There was silence, until Thales suddenly registered the situation. He raised his head and looked in puzzlement at the velvet-clad woman before him. Oh, yeah. Just now, Jins called her the princess? Going by her age, she is probably not Kessel's daughter. So princess means that. But didn't I see the late king's youngest daughter, Kessel V's little sister, the eldest princess, Constance Jadestar in the Jadestar family tomb? Questions popped up in Thales' heart. So, may I know who you are? Thales carefully asked. Oh. The princess title must have confused you. Being considerate, the velvet-clad woman resolved Thales' awkwardness. She lowered her head shyly. My family name is not Jadestar, and I am not a real princess. This princess shook her head lightly. I am only the late king's adopted daughter. You can say that I am your half-aunt. Thales opened his mouth in shock. I am Elise Sara, and am a little younger than Constance. Princess Elise smiled slightly. A charming dimple appeared on the side of her cheek. However, I do not have the right to use the Jadestar family name. Sara, this is my husband's family name. Half-aunt? Why did no one mention it before this? May I know who your husband? Thales spoke in a stiff manner. Hearing that, Elise sighed and spoke, Count Sora, an honorary count from the late king's era. He just passed away a month ago. A widow? No wonder she's wearing black. Is she still mourning? Thales spoke in puzzlement. A month ago? The passing of an honorary count? Was it because of illness? However, Thales realized that he was a little rude. He immediately bowed and apologized. Sorry, Aunt Elise. It was presumptuous of me. Princess Elise was at first stupefied. She then smiled bitterly and spoke, No, there is nothing to hide. The adopted daughter of the late king, Princess Elise, spoke slowly. He died in that huge explosion at the center of Red Street Market a month ago. Red Street Market, huge explosion? Thales immediately froze. Could it be that? It was the night the gangs were fighting in XC District and Western District. Elise spoke sadly. Yes. I knew it. It was the explosion me, Yodel and Asda triggered. He immediately felt guilty. Thales exhaled. He forced down the unhappy feelings in his heart and asked slowly, your husband, why was he in Red Street Market that night? Wasn't there a curfew that night? However, Elise obviously did not know much. She heaved a sigh. Our relationship is not really good. My husband likes to seek pleasure in Red Street Market. A few days before he passed away, I went there to look for him and we had a huge argument. He did not come back for 3 days after that. I never thought that it would be the last time I saw him. Elise shut her eyes, shook her head, and sighed. She tugged the velvet shawl on her shoulders, which was used for keeping her warm. However, at this moment, Thales' pupils suddenly contracted. That velvet shawl looks a little familiar. Velvet, woman, Red Street Market, a few days before the huge explosion, looked for husband, argument, could it be that she is? Thales' entire body trembled greatly. He looked towards his Aunt Elise's face again. This time, his aunt's delicate and pretty face completely overlapped with another face that seemed to have come from an event that happened in the distant past. It seems like it had happened so long ago that I almost forgot. Yes. It's her. That female noble clad in velvet. Thales stared blankly at that princess. That day, it was her. She was the one who was clad in velvet and brought along 20 swordsmen of eradication. She met Thales, who was taking a risk in begging at Blood Bottle Gang's territory in Red Street Market. She was the one who donated 12 coppers and 1 silver coin on the spot to the unkempt Thales. However, Thales' transformation was too great. She probably did not realize that the second prince in front of her was the same child beggar from a month ago. Thales touched his chest. The scar burned by Quide using that silver coin was there. Because of that donation, the seriously ill Coria survived typhoid fever. Because of that donation, Ned ratted them out to Quide. Because of that donation, the child beggars, Quide, Jayla, Red Street Market. Because of that donation, everything else followed. Thales heaved a deep sigh. What seems to be the matter? Princess Elise looked curiously towards Thales, who had a complicated expression on his face. No, nothing much. Thales raised his head and flashed a respectful but cautious smile. This ant suddenly seemed a lot friendlier in his eyes. I'm just a little emotional after meeting your relative. As to say, Kern's smile flashed in front of his eyes again. Is this the coincidence you spoke of? Or dash the desolate figure of the robust Kessel in the royal family's burial ground appeared in front of Thales' eyes. Is this the will of fate? XC District. Underground Market. Sunset Pub. Cast it off. Just pretend that it is a piece of wood. Cast aside useless emotions and principles and become a true Charlton. Cast it off. No. No. Jayla Charlton abruptly woke up from her nightmare. She shot up from the bed gasping. She remembered that after the 3 child beggars were taken away, she knelt down at Sunset Pub and did not get up for a long time until she lost consciousness. And now, so disgraceful. On the other side of the bed, which was the corner of the room, a hoarse voice that Jayla was extremely familiar with rang up. Do you have that nightmare every single time you are upset? Jayla sighed heavily. Old man, when did you come back? She shut her eyes and laid back down on the bed. However, that voice did not have the intention to reply her. Jayla Charlton, if you cannot look back and face your trauma from that year, you can only be a weakling forever. Jayla opened her eyes. She then pursed her lips and turned to face the wall, turning a deaf ear to the old man's words. Who would have thought that even Rhoda could render you powerless to fight back? What a waste of those 2 good knives for killing. Jayla thought of the 3 child beggars who were taken away, as well as Coria's heart-wrenching plea. Sister Jayla. She shut her eyes tight and fought back the tears in her eyes. However, the old man's words were still traveling into her ears. One single trauma made you shut yourself to this extent. You are just like that Quide, that year. The nightmarish memory came. Jayla could not take it anymore. She flipped out of the bed and yelled furiously at the corner. Enough. You don't have to remind me anymore. The old man laughed in a deep voice. He, remind you of what? Humph, look, you are so traumatized that you don't even dare to mention it, the old man continued mocking her. A clunking sound rang, giving Jayla a good scare. She knew that it was the sound of the old man playing with the blade with his fingers. Although she felt a little weak, Jayla stood up indignantly. Humph, you sound as though you were saying that if I mention it, I will immediately become a supreme class elite. The old man continued speaking mysteriously, who knows? However, if you continue escaping from it, you will definitely not be able to reach supreme class, and what happened yesterday will still repeat itself. The Charlton family name will still imprison you all your life like a curse. Do you really want the nightmare of that man to rule you for the rest of your life, or do you want to experience your powerlessness and weakness again? Jayla opened her mouth and took in 2 deep breaths. How is this difficult? She gritted her teeth. It's just that incident. Oh? What incident? The old man's voice started to gain a little lilt. Jayla's face was distorted. The room made of stone appeared before her eyes. It won't do. She started trembling. It won't do. Darkness and blood spread in front of her eyes like current. It won't do. Her teeth started chattering. It won't do. She almost could not breathe. It won't do. I must not recall. However, the next moment, a small figure appeared before her eyes. It was a cocky brat with black hair and gray eyes. Although his body was covered in wounds, he was overconfident and spoke firmly to her. I will go by myself. Jayla opened her eyes and sucked in a mouthful of air. In her mind, she returned to that room made of stone. Trembling, she started speaking. 12 years ago, at Renaissance Palace. Her forehead broke out in cold sweat. Ting. In the air, the sound of the old man flicking the tip of the blade rang. The old man spoke coldly, continue speaking. Jayla grit her teeth hard. Her face became paler and paler. During my first mission. Jayla's entire body started trembling uncontrollably. However, the sight of Rhoda gripping her knife with a calm expression and taking away the 3 child beggars appeared before her eyes. That was Coria's pleading gaze. Jayla shivered. She felt nauseous. Jayla could feel that there was some liquid flowing out of her eyes. Everything in front of her eyes became bright red in color. So scary. Jayla stuttered. Her lips could not touch each other. At that moment, the old man yelled violently. Say it. Jayla's whole body trembled greatly. What followed was a streak of silver light that shot rapidly towards her. Clunk. A wolflin blade was embedded into the wall, half an inch away from Jayla's left ear. Jayla shuddered violently. All the scenery, people, sound, and colors from that day vividly appeared before her eyes again. That day, Her eyes were blank. She could not help but roar loudly. I beheaded a baby while he was alive. After roaring out those words, Jayla panted and took large mouthfuls of air. She felt that the energy in her entire body had left her. 12 years had passed. She managed to shout it out. She finally managed to shout it out. Thump! Trembling, Jayla directly threw herself on her knees. Covering her mouth and holding back the nausea and queasiness, she wailed. At the corner, the old man's voice rang airily. Now, pick up your knife, your own knife. And not Charlton's knife. Chapter 79, Diplomat Group 3 days later. It was just snowing at Eternal Star City this morning. The roads of the city were stained with mud. But the road in front of Mindy's hall was swept clean. A few carriages were already arriving one after another. We are in a bit of a rush. People are saying that Archduke Lampard has yet withdrawn his troops. He is still deploying his soldiers around the border. It is unknown if King Nuvan has chosen to not restrict him or that King Nuvan is unable to restrict him anymore. Gilbert, along with the well-dressed Thales, stood in the study room located on the second floor. They were both looking at the carriages coming through Mindy's hall's entrance from the window. Gilbert said with a serious expression on his face, "It seems like conflicts aimed to test your stance cannot be avoided. Even though Baron Murch and Lady Cecile are going to serve as garrisons in the forts while the Zamunto and Fries family also promised to give their full support, I heard that after receiving news of the Duke's imprisonment, Coldcastle and Arundi's vassals are in a state of chaos. It is better for us to arrive earlier in order to eliminate the disaster of war." Thales lightly nodded his head as he listened to Gilbert's report in silence. "According to usual practice, as Constellation's prince, Your Highness, you will need 3 instructors to respectively guide you on military affairs, political affairs, and etiquettes. You will also need 1 attendant, who will usually become your assistant hereafter, and 2 protectors. But since your diplomatic mission will arrive soon, we can only keep everything simple and make up what you lack by the time you return to Constellation. Since the place you are heading to is the unfamiliar Extet, and the aim of this trip is to apologize, we have no other choice than to reduce the number of followers you have. Apart from 30 Jadestar private soldiers led by Cora, there are 3 special candidates. There is 1 instructor. I will introduce an extremely knowledgeable scholar to you later, as the vice diplomat of this trip, 1 attendant, which has already been chosen and is currently in the carriage, 1 protector. Since your safety is very important, the protector must be an experienced supreme class expert." Thales could not help but to feel stunned when he heard this. "The candidates for instructor and protector, Gilbert, do you mean that you, Yodel and even Jins, will not accompany me on this trip?" Gilbert smiled at him helplessly. He said faintly, "Yes. I am the signatory of the Fortress Treaty, and I have an infamous reputation in Extet as a conspirator. My appearance in Dragoncloud City will only bring upon unnecessary troubles to you." As for Yodel, Gilbert shook his head. For the past 10 years in Northland, there have been 5 strong, supreme-class warriors with outstanding reputation, commonly known as the 5 war generals. Each respectively worked under King Nuvan and the few archdukes. Their status is similar to the 3 commanders of Constellation, who wield the legendary anti-mystic equipment. Your Highness, if you happen to meet any one of them, please do not mention the elite who wears a dark purple mask and also the fact that he is now the secret protector of the Supreme King of Constellation. Thales was momentarily stunned. After a month of education, he knew about Constellation's 3 commanders, but as for Extet's 5 war generals? The former foreign affairs minister sighed. "Yodel has offended every single one of them." Thales spent a second to understand that sentence, then his face twitched as he replied, every single one of them? What kind of offense did he commit?" Gilbert only glanced at him in silence. Thales took a deep breath and put on a resigned smile. "All right, I guess it is the kind that is more troublesome." Another question was added in the prince's heart. Yodel's past. What exactly did he do to provoke all of the 5 war generals at the same time? It was just like a person who set himself against the 3 commanders at the same time. It was totally unimaginable. Gilbert glanced out of the window and saw a few people walking down one after another from the carriage. As for Madame Jins, her identity is rather sensitive, you know, her relationship with the king. Thales sighed. "According to what you have told me, besides the allies from Corleone family, I probably will not see any familiar faces around me, am I right?" Gilbert became reserved. "This is the exact matter I was about to bring up. Are you really going to bring members of the Corleone family along with you?" Thales replied with a solemn expression, "I have already made a promise with them. I do not like to go back on my word. Also, even though that old witch, Serena, is annoying, she did use the Blood Clan's telepathic ability to help me during a crisis. It is not an exaggeration to say that she saved my life." Thales furrowed his brows. After all, they have 1 supreme-class expert and 2 supra-class experts. Serena also hopes to realize the restoration of her position by relying on my status. These are all bargaining chips that I can take advantage of. On the way to Northland, they can hide among the followers by changing their appearance. He paused slightly and thought of that robust figure. Also, His Majesty has already agreed to this, did he not? Gilbert exhaled lightly. Of course, that is the promise of Constellation's prince. It is Jadestar's promise. They will not dare to be too presumptuous when in Constellation is the king and our forces are always by your side, but when you are in Extet, I hope they will not bring about any trouble. After all, Yodel and I will not be by your side. Gilbert furrowed his brows. You have to be careful of that old butler, Chris. I always feel like I have heard of his name from somewhere. Thales rolled his eyes at Gilbert. Hey, do not forget who was the one who facilitated this alliance. Gilbert gave him a perfect smile and tipped his hat. Thales' expression became worried. Also, Gilbert, the matter I mentioned to you yesterday, about Lower City District. Gilbert breathed out from his nose. Yes, Your Highness, since your identity no longer needs to be kept a secret, and Mindy's Hall has already resumed its free passage, I have already sent someone to Lower City District yesterday afternoon. We will get a report back, latest by tonight. It is not easy to blend into that place. People from the Secret Intelligence Department are more suitable than us in investigating the matter regarding those beggars and that female bartender. I will update you on the latest situation by corresponding with you. I believe you will already be on your way by that time. If possible, I will do my best in taking care of them, even if we almost have no manpower in Lower City District. Thank you. Thales looked at the former Foreign Affairs Minister gratefully. This way, I have no need to go to Morat anymore. But you have to understand. Gilbert hesitated slightly, but he still lifted his head and said, what the Black Prophet said was not entirely unreasonable, Your Highness. After all, you are different from them. Thales' gaze became still for a moment. Furthermore, it may not be a good thing for them to be too close to you, your help may be entirely useless to them. Worse, it may even bring upon disaster. Thales kept quiet for a while before putting on an ugly smile. I know. I know. He nodded and exhaled, then he turned around and adjusted his collar. My dear are you ready? It is time to go. A strange but faint noise of metal chafing against each other sounded through the door from outside. My dear Ralph was walking on a pair of weird metal prosthetics when he staggered into their field of vision. He bowed slightly towards Thales in a manner that failed to meet the standard requirements. Gilbert raised his eyebrows a little. Half of Ralph's face and his neck were covered with a strange silver mask, and the mask shielded the knotted flesh on his throat as well as the tattoo on his face. However, what was even stranger were the pair of prosthetics underneath his knees. Constellation had a good relationship with the dwarfs of Steel City, even the skills of Constellation smiths had increased greatly thanks to them. It only took 2 days for the capable royal craftsman to build a pair of simple prosthetics for Ralph. The prosthetics were made of 2 pieces of durable and flexible steel plates of excellent quality. The steel plates were bent into an L shape, then molded into a flexible J shape with crystal drops infused into the curves to strengthen those parts. A fixing plate was made to connect to the knee, and it was fastened onto his belt. This way, Ralph managed to walk without using his crutches. Of course, his movements during a battle such as dodging and changing directions would have to depend on his own, wind-controlling psionic ability. Thales raised his eyebrows. Not bad, but the parts below your knees are very distracting. Next time, do cover them up with your pants. My dear Ralph lowered his head and pulled out a stack of papers that were stapled together. Gilbert suddenly realized that Ralph was not hesitating. Instead, he was flipping through the papers in his hands and searching for the right sign. Ralph clumsily found the drawing he wanted. He then looked towards Thales and raised his right fist. At the same time, he bent his wrist and swung his hand down lightly twice. Yes. Thales smiled slightly. Very good, what you still lack is proficiency in both your sign language and your prosthetics. As it happens, we can continue your course on the way there. Ralph smiled and found another paper before making another sign. Thank you. Gilbert sighed. Since you have already decided to follow His Highness to Northland, to Extet, I hope you will learn about the difficulties of this current trip, and do your best in protecting His Highness. Ralph lowered his head slightly. This time, he did not need to flip through his notes, instead, he remembered the right sign and gestured it. Gilbert furrowed his brows in confusion and finally turned towards Thales, feeling clueless. Thales laughed as he replied, he said he will try his best. Gilbert exhaled and shook his head in resignation. Alright, at least, this is a good method to transmit secret messages. This psionic with the background of a gangster who they rescued from Vine Manor, no, he was of supraclass. Although he was still very immature in battle, but strictly speaking, he could already be considered as a psionic warrior. What exactly had happened that made him to submit to His Highness so compliantly? Thales waved lightly and snapped his fingers. Very good, let us begin our journey. The main entrance of Mindy's Hall. How have you been recently, my old friend? Before a few carriages, Gilbert extended his hand and tightly shook hands with a thin man, who was the leader. Very bad. The thin man's expression was sour. Eternal Star City's administrative efficiency is far behind Western Desert's frontline military camp. I came to the capital for the documents of the Grand Library, but I lost my senior pass 1 month ago. So, I could only wait in the capital until now, then, they told me that it would take half a year to replace the pass. I guess you probably used up all of your travel expenses, which is the reason why you came to me. Gilbert replied with a smile. But you have given me such a troublesome assignment. The thin man sighed and sized Thales up with his gaze. You also do not want me to give you the money directly, am I right? Gilbert moved sideways to reveal Thales' figure. This is Lord Poutre Namain from the Cawing Crow City of Western Desert Hill. We studied under the same home tutor before. Gilbert introduced the 40-year-old man, who spoke in a blunt manner towards Thales. Poutre was once a bard who wandered and traveled across more than half of the world. He is very knowledgeable on the geography of peninsulas and also social customs of various countries. He also spent quite some time in Northland. Your Highness, you once complained to me that you did not know much about the world, so I believe Poutre is a great candidate. He will be your vice diplomat as well as your instructor, and he will follow you on the way up north. Poutre, this is the second prince, Prince Thales. His intelligence will surprise you. From his expression, the thin man, Poutre did not seem like he was happy about this. Nevertheless, he lifted up his right fist and placed it before his chest and bowed before Thales. It is a pleasure to have the chance to learn from you, Poutre. Can I call you by your name? Thales returned the greeting with a smile on his face. Of course, you are the prince. You can call me whatever you want. Poutre shrugged nonchalantly. He did not show any signs of excitement and respect in meeting Constellation's only prince. Sorry, he has quite the odd personality, but I believe you will admire his scholarly knowledge and his rich experiences, Gilbert laughed as he said to Thales. He was not even the least bit worried that his old friend's irreverent attitude would bring about the second prince's aversion. Thales stared at the thin poutre and then glanced at the Highland boots on his feet. Thales did not show any emotions on his face, but he sighed deeply in his heart. This is fate. It is him. That day when Quide went mad, the people of the sixth house met a thin man wearing Highland boots at Western City Gate, whose face was sour. He was unwilling to give them money. Hence, Ryan and Kellett decided to teach him a lesson by stealing the only card he had on him. It was the pass for the Jade Star Grand Library. At the time, Thales thought he was an abject scholar. Thales rolled his eyes out of the other's sight. I am really sorry, Sir Poutre. Your library pass is currently in one of the abandoned houses in Lower City District. Gilbert led him towards the next person. This person was a young lad, who was about 20 years old with a sword fastened to his waist. His expression was firm and he had a tall, straight build. His face was normal, but he had a penetrating gaze. Gilbert stared at the young man in front of him, his eyes were filled with complicated and unreadable emotions. This is a candidate decided by both His Majesty and me, and he will serve as your attendant, no matter in Northland's Extet or after your return to Constellation. He just returned from the Tower of Eradication a few months ago, why a queso? Thales reacted to this immediately. He stared at Gilbert in confusion. Queso? Yes, I hope this will not bring about aversion. After all, it is nepotism, but I can vouch that he was the only elite left after going through many levels of screening. Gilbert sighed. He is indeed also my son. The young man, White Queso, did not spare a glance at his own father as he bowed respectfully before Thales. It is a pleasure to meet you, Prince Thales. My sword and intelligence will be used for you. For the rest of my life, I will serve you wholeheartedly. Thales felt slightly awkward. Was it really suitable for someone to use the phrase for the rest of my life during their first meeting? Despite that, he still nodded in response with a joyful expression. I will rely on you throughout this journey then, Waya. Waya lowered his head in respect. My life and my body are yours to use. Thales once again rolled his eyes in his mind. Gilbert was obviously very good at socializing, but why is his son? His son is a little, should I say, too serious, or is he just plain silly? Nevertheless, he could also feel that Waya was seemingly not on good terms with Gilbert. A cold father and son relationship? Gilbert sighed and continued to move forward with Thales. This time, Thales did not need any introduction when he saw the figure underneath the cloak. He yelled out in astonishment, "It is you." The petite figure underneath the cloak turned around with her hands on her waist. Yes, she replied in a carefree manner. Her response was not respectful or cold and callous, but it made people feel that she was genuine. It is me. With his face devoid of any emotions, it appeared that he became this way after meeting his own son, Gilbert said. You have probably met her before. Similar to Yodel, originally, she was one of His Majesty's secret protectors. His Majesty specially transferred her. Hey, hey, hey. What do you mean by transfer? Kessel can never order me around. The cloaked lady who hid her face cut Gilbert's speech off. With no trace of politeness, she walked towards Thales and stared at the dumbstruck prince. She patted his shoulder with her left hand as she pointed her right thumb towards herself. Brat, my name is Ida. Ida? Thales was momentarily stunned. Ada Wong? Thud. Under the sour expressions of Gilbert and the rest, Ida smacked Thales' head hard. She blew a whistle as Thales rubbed his head, grimacing in pain. What Wong? I am not from the main Equinox dynasty from the Far East, listen closely, my name is Ida Laura Carter Giselle. Ida appeared to be encountering some obstacles. She could be seen desperately scratching her head for a few seconds. Finally, the cloaked lady put down her hand powerlessly as she said in disappointment, Hey, never mind, my name is far too long. Sometimes, I cannot even remember it, just call me Ida, then. Thales was flabbergasted as he stared at Ida. He felt that his serious outlook on life was refurbished. However, this feeling of being knocked on the head was very familiar. A few familiar figures appeared before his eyes. He did not know how Jayla and those few children were doing. He had only received some vague news from Morat. Gilbert's face became pale with anger. Madam Ida, please be careful with your actions towards His Highness the next time around. Thales rubbed his head, which was gradually starting to ache less. He noticed that even though Gilbert was obviously dissatisfied, it did not seem like he was about to hold her accountable. So, he also silently consents to her hitting a prince's head? Ida said in dissatisfaction, what is wrong again? Do not tell me that I cannot knock his head. Back then, when I knocked Mindy's head, even Kara did not dare to have an opinion. Thales froze as he noticed that Gilbert did not refute her statement. Wait a minute. Mindy's? Kira? Which Mindy's in the royal family? Kira. Was that the royal family's supreme class expert, enemy of the wolves Kara Jadestar, who was around over 200 years ago? Her voice seems young, but... Thales lifted his eyes and looked at Ida. How old exactly is she? Thales smiled with much difficulty. Madam Ida, you are especially lively. You are right. Underneath the cloak, Ida seemed to be very happy as she punched her palm. My entire family also says the same thing. It is because of this that they kicked me out. Thales did not even bother hiding it when he rolled his eyes. Gilbert forcefully coughed to attract the attention of the people around the carriages. Everyone, if there are no problems, you can get to know each other and acclimatize yourselves with one another during your journey. I believe everyone knows about the aim and mission of this trip. If there are no further questions, we shall proceed into the carriages now. His Majesty and a few dukes are waiting at the northern city gate to send the diplomat group off, he announced loudly. Cora nodded and the 30 Jade-Star private soldiers started busying themselves with their tasks. Gilbert nodded towards Thales and sent him to his carriage. The serious-looking prince's attendant, Queso, was staring at the peculiar-looking Ralph with an unpleasant expression. However, under the gaze of Thales' smiling face, he followed the Phantom Wind follower and the second prince into the same carriage. Poutre! Gilbert yelled at the thin man, who was boarding the carriage. Poutre turned around without any expression on his face. The former Foreign Affairs Minister, Count Gilbert Queso, appeared solemn when he said, I am handing over the prince and the whole of Constellation's future to you. You have traversed more than half of the world, from the Battle of Crystal Wall City, the Bloody Year, the Desert War, the Alliance Civil War, the riot between Steel and Tree, to Eastern Peninsula's Hanbol Inheritance War as well as the chaotic battlefield in Main Equinox Regnum. You have seen numerous wars and chaotic battles. You know how brutal they were, and your current trip is to eliminate the threat of war on behalf of Constellation. Enough! Poutre cut his old friend off. This thin man still had a displeased look on his face, but his eyes were glinting with a bright light. I have already accepted it. It is just the same as 12 years ago. Chapter 80, Nanchester's Suggestion. It was early morning on the road towards the northern city gate in Eternal Star City. A troop of city defense team soldiers tactfully avoided a bunch of people standing in the vacant space ahead. They were also conscious in stopping other people from approaching the space. Be rest assured that I am not stupid enough to harm and kill the prince under the public eyes of the capital. The guardian duke of the Land of Cliffs region, Koster Nanchester, was seen standing tall and upright in the middle of the road. He shook off the snow that covered the great deer antler symbol on his cape as he said coldly, I just want to meet him. He stood in front of the continuous fleet of carriages and stared at the Jade-Star private army, who had vigilant expressions on their faces while waiting for their master's reply. Gilbert got down from the carriage and looked over at the great deer antler carriage as well as few protectors of the Nanchester family, who were close by. He also noticed that there was another carriage with a tricolor iris flower symbol, stationed at a distant spot. He furrowed his brows. Sir Nanchester, if you want to see the diplomat group off, you can wait at the northern city gate. Stopping the diplomat group halfway is not the sort of manner the suzerain of a land ought to have. Koster looked unhappy and he pointed towards the carriage a distance away. I am not the only one. That tricolor iris flowers brat is also here. Gilbert immediately pondered over the current situation. Koster shook his cape impatiently. We all know that he is not some normal child even though he is only 7 or 8 years old. Pass the news to the second prince and let him make the decision. The voice of a young child could then be heard from the third carriage. It is all right, Gilbert. Let me handle this. Thales pushed the carriage door open and with the company of both the anxious Queso and the guarded Madeira Ralph, Thales walked towards Koster with a calm, composed look on his face. Koster looked at the child with a perplexed gaze and stuck his chin out towards the direction of the roadside. Thales inhaled deeply and nodded. He gestured towards his attendant and the Phantom Wind follower before following Koster to the side of the road. What kind of drama is this again? The vice-diplomat of the group and the prince's instructor, the thin Lord Poutre, got down from his carriage impatiently. It was as though his lovely morning had been disturbed. Gilbert shook his head. Internal struggle of the kingdom. Why is it so peaceful? Poutre squinted his eyes and looked over at the two different figures, the Duke of the Land of Cliffs and the second prince, who were standing in the distance. Peaceful? Gilbert glanced at his old friend with furrowed brows. Poutre pursed his lips and sneered. It is so peaceful that I almost want to cry. You should go to the Eastern Peninsula, to Kirin Holy Capital. See the internal fights of the Chen royal family with the eunuchs and officials, who were given honorary titles in the main Equinox dynasty. Of course, you have never been there, so it is normal for you to have such shallow knowledge and experience on this. Gilbert snorted resentfully as he could not seem to find a valid argument to refute Poutre's words. Damned bard. Thales stared at the Duke of Great Deer Antler, who was wearing a hostile expression on his face while he pondered about the Duke's intention. He must have some sort of motive for coming. But we are already destined to be enemies. I have to be vigilant. I did not expect you to be the first person to come, Thales said quietly. Koster snorted. I did not want to meet you before so many people, since Fakin has ridicules are very annoying. The one-eyed dragon stared coldly at him. Brat, I know you are very intelligent, so I will cut the nonsense. Listen. I do not like you. Never before has anyone dared to call me a hypocrite. Thales helplessly spread out his hands. Then, what do you want me to call you? A liar? Deceiver? Or, skilled actor? The best actor? The leader of the Mount Hua sect, Ubuchuan one? Koster ignored his words. The scar on his blinded left eye was hideous. Nonetheless, I can still abandon my prejudice. In the future, the Land of Cliffs region can fully support you to be the supreme king and suppress those restless nobles as well as suzerains with ulterior motives. The Great Deer Antler will serve you as our master, and Jade-Star will continue to be the royal family. Thales was momentarily stunned. What? Thales' brows wrinkled in confusion. I thought the great deer antler and I were already absolutely irreconcilable. However, Koster still did not pay any attention to him. There is only one condition, the one-eyed dragon said in an irrefutable manner. Thales, who was frightened by the one-eyed dragon's abnormal behavior, let out a sigh of relief. As expected, you would never express goodwill to me for no reason. War comes with a price, and victory comes with rewards too. Koster narrowed his only eye. This is Nanchester family's motto, spoken in our native language. The second prince lifted his head to meet the one-eyed dragon's gaze. So, what price do I have to pay in order to get your reward? Asked the extremely vigilant Thales cautiously. It's very simple, Koster said in a strict manner. King Kessel has to step down from his throne, and you are to be crowned the king in advance. Step down, coronation. What? Thales took an entire 3 seconds to understand what was just said. Then, his face changed color due to agitation. Koster did not show any signs that he was joking, as he kept staring at Thales solemnly. The two of them stared into each other's eyes for a full 5 seconds. How dare you attempt to incite discord between the only father-son pair in Jadestar? Thales laughed with his mouth wide opened. Do you not know that the reason why I own everything I have now is all because of His Majesty, my father? This is not an attempt to incite discord. This is a sincere suggestion and invitation. The one-eyed dragon's expression remained the same and his tone was serious. What we fear and hate is not Jadestar, or you. Our grudges are nothing when it comes to the kingdom. What we fear and hate is your father, the Iron Hand King. Thales stared intently at the one-eyed dragon with bright eyes. Koster was unprecedentedly serious when he continued speaking. Why do you think the new star was established? Do you think that Arundi's actions entirely stemmed from his personal hatred and dissatisfaction? The suzerains were doing this out of self-preservation. In order for the families that have existed since the country was founded to this day, to continue existing, enough. Thales cut him off without a sign of hesitation. What a joke, this degree of provocation. Thales replied coldly, I can only see all of you persistently persecuting my father, and the royal family that is suffering. Questioning my identity, obstructing me from getting the power and authority I deserve. The one-eyed dragon suddenly appeared to be angry and cut Thales off with a loud yell. He could be heard yelling, brat. If you can only listen to the story of the sorrowful king and the determined royal family, fed to you by the king's partisan, you might as well dig both of your eyes out and only leave your ears to do the job. Thales was stupefied for a moment. The one-eyed dragon lightly exhaled a few times before saying to him word by word, you underestimate your father, the Iron Hand King, and underestimate the fear he brings upon the whole of Constellation. Koster slowly said, ever since the end of the Bloody Year, Kessel has become increasingly tyrannical. He is almost crazy about seizing power. From supporting the Duchess of Bladedge Hill, who previously could only survive by relying on the royal family's prestigious reputation to indirectly controlling the two great clans of the southwest, then moving up to control Piranha of the kingdom's southwestern coast and the wealthiest Sunflower. Then moving to breaking the rules and enlisting the 3 commanders as well as building the royal family's regular army to an astonishing scale. After that, he weakened each suzerain's central tax bill, set up the enlistment bill, and greatly gave rise to the county development bill proposed by the new nobles. Not to mention his use of the national conference, which is his favorite. He forced the suzerains to give in and hand over their power to the royal family by utilizing the pressure brought about by thousands upon thousands of public opinion. It was the same for the Desert War, and also the inheritance of the kingship. The combined voices of the suzerains during the higher parliament meeting was useless. Only the king's voice and the cheers from the plaza could be heard when the final decision was made. He even wanted to interfere with the inheritance of the 6 great clans and 13 distinguished families. There were even traces of his involvement in the internal fight of the Covendir family 2 years ago. Thales' heart trembled. What is this? Koster continued with a dark expression, do you really think that we do not care about Constellation's survival, especially when no one is willing to send out their soldiers for the king even though war is imminent? Your father and his methods are too scary. If we let him do what he wants for another 20 years, he will completely swallow up the power, fortune, status, people and territories of all 19 noble families. We can only surrender or be destroyed, or both. Constellation will return to imperialism. With the presence of such a king, how can we not be frightened? How can we not fight back? How can we not do our best to protect ourselves? Koster's only eye was flaming with rage and he took an oppressive step forward. You saw, the Northern Territory was forced to rebel. Bladedge Hill had several parts of its territory become property of the royal family. The strength of South Coast Hill was greatly weakened due to its family feud. Eastern Sea Hill was so terrified they became cowards. Western Desert just barely managed to protect itself due to the importance of the Western battle line. His gaze was stern yet solemn. As for the Land of Cliffs region, we do not want to resign to fate. New Star taking advantage of Eksted's power and restraining Kessel's royal power was the last method we could use besides taking up arms when we were forced to a dead end. Koster clenched his teeth tightly together. It was a small matter that we failed to succeed, but if Kessel continues to act willfully. Thales stared at the Duke of the Land of Cliffs in shock. This was another version of Constellation's current situation that he heard. It was totally different from the version Gilbert instilled into him. Koster's voice sounded mournful. The Bloody Year changed him. Kessel became a true emperor of the empire. He wants to dominate everything in this nation. He treats every suzerain like his enemy and never shows mercy when he suppresses or schemes against them. He treats Constellation as his personal carriage, without controlling his usage of the horsewhip and spurs. People whom he can take advantage of will become bargaining chips, whereas people whom he cannot take advantage of will be suppressed or eliminated. Those who obey him shall flourish, and those who oppose him shall perish. Thales was furrowing his brows tightly, recalling the few counts who questioned the king's power when the national conference had just started. This is not something good, regardless of it is for us suzerains or Jadestar, or even the whole of Constellation. If this continues, it will lead to a disaster sooner or later in this old nation. Koster gritted his teeth, his only eye gleamed as if there was lightning inside. You are heading to Ekstedt soon. This is not some good errand, but it will make you view Constellation from another perspective. Go and take a look at how the children of the Northern Wind and the Dragon see us. Thales lowered his head as he tried to calm his own breathing. Why did Tormund decide to rule with the suzerains? Was it not exactly because after 2 generations of tyranny, the empire fell to its own final demise? Thales opened his mouth, but then immediately swallowed the word calamity back into his stomach. He had a feeling that the end of the empire was not as simple as an attack from the calamity, something which Gilbert claimed. Koster turned around coldly and tugged his cape tighter around himself. If your goal is just to become a tyrant like your father, disregarding the possibility of Constellation's downfall, just pretend that I did not tell you anything today. The one-eyed dragon stared at Thales with a complex gaze. Thales was already deep in thought. But what you said the other day, if you really care about Constellation's safety and stability, peace and prosperity, if that is your wish instead of only becoming the supreme king, then, my suggestion is always in effect. Duke Nanchester spoke his last sentence before he turned around and left. Have a safe journey. Do not embarrass Constellation. Thales stared at the departing one-eyed dragon in a trance. This Koster was totally different than the Duke of the Land of Cliffs at the National Conference, who coerced the king to appoint an heir. Thales told himself, no. These are all ruses from the other party. Their motive is to ruin Kessel's image, to drive a wedge between me and my father. Also, a voice from a very long time ago sounded in his mind. Moving from a feudalistic country to a country that practices absolutism with centralized state power is a road that almost every European country has to take. Nevertheless, Thales still clenched his fist lightly. He lifted his head to watch Koster, who was walking farther away, and also at Zayn Kovendir, whom Koster passed by. I hope I am not interrupting you. Zayn bowed gracefully. Koster replied coldly, no. I will be perfectly satisfied if you stop being fooled by others, and stop thinking of me as the person behind the assassination. Zayn's expression stirred as he watched Koster walk into his carriage. Thales, who was feeling a little faint due to how troublesome this matter was, sighed deeply. In a bad mood, he looked at Zayn and asked, and what do you want?